Hey there, if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or a subscribe. It helps more than you know. I'm always curious where you all are listening from, so drop a comment with your city and what time it is there. It's strangely comforting to know people all over the world are falling asleep to the same quiet history. Alright, get comfortable, fix your pillows, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations. You just woke up in London in the year 1841. It's still dark outside, the kind of heavy grey that presses against window glass and seeps through every crack. You're 6 years old, maybe 7. You've been sleeping under a rough wool blanket, its damp weight familiar against your skin. The floor beneath you is stone cold, uneven, always a little wet. You can smell soot before you even open your eyes. It clings to everything, the floor, your skin, your breath. Somewhere nearby, your master coughs. It's a low, rattling sound that tells you he's already awake. You've learned that sound means you should be awake too. You pull yourself upright and feel the muscles in your arms ache. They always ache. You slept in your work clothes again, thick with black grease and coal dust, because there's nothing else to wear. Your breakfast, if it comes, will be a heel of bread dipped in cold tea. Sometimes there's no bread, sometimes there's no tea. But you've learned that hunger burns less when you start working early, before the other boys crowd around the kettle. The master's boots scrape the floor. Up, he says. He doesn't need to shout. You know what comes next. You step outside, the air still thick from last night's rain. The street smells like smoke and horse dung and wet rope. A fog lingers low, turning the gas lamps into pale yellow orbs. The city is already awake in its own quiet way. Milk carts creaking, dogs barking, the rattle of early trams over cobblestones. You follow the master through narrow alleys, carrying the soot brush and scraper. The brush is taller than you. Its bristles are stiff and blackened, worn down from years of scraping soot from the insides of chimneys. The rods are made of ash wood, light, but splintery. You've got a few scars from them along your arms where they rubbed raw skin into calluses. The house you're headed to belongs to someone important. Most of your work is in such houses, those with drawing rooms, breakfast rooms, and long, twisting flues that snake through walls like narrow brick intestines. Chimneys that haven't been swept for months or even years. At the front door, the butler greets your master with the usual impatience of someone who doesn't want to be seen dealing with your kind. Best keep them quiet, he mutters. The family's still abed. The master nods. You slip off your shoes' thin leather soles cracked at the toes and start preparing the tools. You know the routine without needing to be told. A sheet goes over the fireplace opening. The rods are laid out. The scraper is checked for sharpness. Then your master turns to you and gestures toward the dark hole above the grate. Up you go. The flue mouth is just wide enough for your shoulders to fit. The soot at the bottom is damp and sticky, a mixture of tar, ash, and oil. You press your bare feet against the brick sides and start climbing. The walls are rough, some bricks jutting out, others slick with creosote. You wedge your knees, elbows, and back to keep steady as you push upward. It's pitch black within a few feet. The only light comes from the faint orange glow of the fire that once burned here. Your breathing sounds strange inside the narrow space, too loud, too close. Soot falls into your eyes, your mouth. You try not to cough. Coughing makes you slip. Every few feet, you pause to scrape. The metal rasp clinks against brick, dislodging years of built-up soot. It falls past your face in a fine black rain. You can taste it, bitter and metallic. When the air grows too thick, you press your cheek against the cool brick to rest. Sometimes in these moments, your mind drifts. You imagine what it would be like to be one of the boys who sells papers outside the tavern, shouting headlines for a penny. They get to see the sky all day. They don't have to crawl through flues no wider than a coffin. You've heard stories of boys getting stuck. Some suffocate before anyone can reach them. But you don't let yourself think too long about that. You keep climbing, higher, scrape, pull, push. The chimney narrows again. You exhale to squeeze through. You've learned to flatten your ribs, to twist just so. The heat from the bricks seeps through your thin shirt. By the time you reach the bend, your arms tremble. You scrape once more, the sound of metal against stone echoing faintly through the walls. When you finally reach the top, there's a small grate leading to the roof. You push it open. Cold air floods in. For a moment, the soot-filled blackness gives way to a pale, washed-out London dawn. From the rooftop, you can see miles of chimneys, thousands of them, rising like stone forests over rows of houses. Smoke drifts upward from some, curling lazily in the wind. The rooftops glisten faintly with dew. You sit there for a moment, breathing the cleaner air, though your lungs protest. Every breath feels heavy, as if coated in dust. You look down the street, rows of narrow homes, each with its own stack, its own smoke. Somewhere down there, the city is waking properly now. Vendors shouting, carts clattering, children running errands. But up here, it's quiet. Just the faint whistle of wind through the bricks. Then the master calls. His voice carries up faintly through the flue. Time to come down. The descent is faster but worse. The soot you loosened on the way up now coats you head to toe as you slide down. You emerge from the fireplace like a ghost made of smoke. The sheet catches most of the falling soot, though a fine layer still settles over the hearth and carpet. The butler frowns. You stand still while your master checks your work. He nods once, satisfied. Next one, he says. You work until mid-morning. 4 houses today, maybe 5. Each chimney a different shape, some wider, some more twisting. Some with nests inside, birds that never made it out. You've found bones before, once even a half-burned toy wedged high in the bricks. At noon you're allowed to eat, bread again, maybe a scrap of cheese if you're lucky. The other boys huddle in the alley, sharing what they have. Their faces are streaked with soot, eyes red from smoke. You laugh a little, quietly. Not because anything's funny, but because it keeps you from thinking too much about the long afternoon ahead. By late day, your arms ache so much you can barely lift the brush, but you keep working. The master is always watching, his cane tapping against his boot. He's not cruel, exactly, just tired, hardened by years of the same routine. Sometimes he reminds you that he started the same way. I was climbing flues when I was your age, he says, though he's twice your size now. It makes a man of you. You don't know what kind of man that means. When the work is finally done, you walk home. The sky is grey again, the kind of grey that never quite becomes night. The streets are crowded now, factory workers heading home, women with baskets of bread, the clatter of iron wheels. You feel invisible among them. Just another sooty child in a city full of smoke. Back at the lodging house, you wash in a basin of cold water. The soot never fully comes off. It's under your nails, in your ears, along the lines of your neck. You rub until your skin stings, then stop. You're too tired to care. You eat another crust of bread, curl up in your corner, and pull the damp blanket over yourself. The air smells like ash and old sweat. You listen to the sound of rain against the roof, to the distant rumble of carts. You try to imagine a world without chimneys, without soot, without climbing. You've heard whispers, new machines that can clean flues without boys, brushes that extend by rods turned from below. Some say they'll make sweeps like you unnecessary. You're not sure whether that's good or bad. You can't imagine doing anything else. You don't know how to read or write. You only know the dark, narrow spaces between the walls. Outside, thunder rolls faintly. The rain thickens. You close your eyes, and for a moment the sound of rain and the sound of falling soot blur together. Somewhere far away, another boy is climbing, coughing, scraping his way toward the same grey dawn. Tomorrow will be the same. You'll wake in the dark, taste soot on your tongue, and crawl into another chimney. Each day is almost identical to the last. Yet in that sameness, there's something strangely steady, something that keeps you moving, one scrape, one breath at a time. You don't know that Parliament is already debating laws to protect children like you, that in just a few years, the Act for the Regulation of Chimney Sweepers will forbid anyone under 10 from climbing flues. You don't know that inspectors will struggle to enforce it, that boys will still be forced to climb well into the 1860s. You only know the weight of soot, the echo of your own heartbeat inside brick walls, and the faint, cold wind above the rooftops. And as you drift to sleep, you wonder, when the chimneys no longer need you, what will you become? You wake again before dawn. There is no bell, no clock, only the rhythm of your own body, trained to stir when the sky is still black. The first sound you hear is coughing, a deep, wet sound that fills the little room where you and 6 other boys sleep. It's the sound of lungs coated with years of soot. No one speaks of it. It's just part of the work. Your blanket is stiff with grime. The straw beneath you smells faintly of mold. A rat scurries somewhere near the corner, but you don't flinch. They never bite the sweet boys. You smell too much like smoke. You pull your knees close and wait for the master's voice. He calls a few minutes later. Up. That's all he says. One word, same every day. The boys move in silence. You wash your face in the same cold water basin, watching the surface turn black with soot. The chill wakes you fully. The air is damp with the scent of coal fires still burning from the night before. Breakfast is half a roll of bread, hard as stone. The master's wife pours tea from a cracked pot, more brown water than anything else. You drink it anyway. The warmth in your stomach feels almost kind. You hold the tin cup in both hands just to feel the heat. Outside, the streets are quiet except for the clip of hooves and the steady hiss of rain against the cobblestones. London is always wet, a city that never fully dries. Chimney smoke hangs like low clouds, and you can smell 100 different fires at once. Oak, coal, tallow, peat. Each has its own taste, its own texture in the air. The first job is a row of townhouses near the Strand. The master is in a good mood today. He's been promised steady work for the week. He walks faster than usual, his heavy coat swinging at his sides. You and the others follow, tools clanking against each other, brush poles rattling like bones. You know better than to fall behind. At the house, the maid meets you. Her apron is white, freshly pressed, and she looks at you with the kind of expression people use for stray dogs, pity mixed with disgust. "Through here," she says, voice clipped. "Mind the rug." You step carefully across the floor, leaving faint black prints that she'll have to scrub later. She knows it, you see it in the way she sighs. The fireplace is tall, the bricks pale beneath a layer of soot. The master orders you to climb first. You nod and kneel down, looking up into the black mouth of the chimney. It smells of smoke and last night's roast beef. You can hear faint echoes inside, the way sound folds in tight spaces. You take a breath, steady yourself, and start the climb. Every chimney has its own rhythm. Some twist sharply, others open wide. Some are so narrow you have to breathe shallowly to fit. This one is long and crooked. You brace your knees, elbows, and back, pushing upward inch by inch. The brick edges scrape against your skin, leaving small cuts that sting. You've long stopped feeling fear, but not pain. Pain still comes, steady, dull, familiar. Halfway up, you find a blockage, a nest of sticks and feathers wedged tight. You know what to do. You scrape around it, careful not to slip. A burst of soot falls, blinding you for a moment. You cough, the sound echoing up the flue. Your throat burns. You blink until you can see again, though seeing here means only guessing where the next brick might be. You keep climbing until you reach the top bend. When you push your brush through, a small rain of soot falls onto the hearth below. You can almost hear it pattering like black snow. The master calls from below. Good work. Move on. You start to descend. The soot clings to your skin, mixing with sweat. You can taste metal on your tongue, iron and ash. When you finally crawl out, the maid looks away quickly, covering her nose with a handkerchief. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand. The skin there is cracked, faintly bleeding. Between houses, you walk through the alleys behind the main streets. Here, the smell is stronger. Dung, fish, wet wood, refuse piled high. The rain makes it worse. You pass other children, errand boys, flower sellers, mudlarks scavenging by the river. Some stare at you, some don't. Everyone looks dirty, though no one looks quite as blackened as a sweep. You hear bells from St. Clement's Church as you pass. The sound seems to come from a cleaner world. You can't remember the last time you were inside a church. The master says there's no need. God knows who works hard and who doesn't, he says. And that's enough. You're not sure whether you believe him. At midday, you rest in a yard behind a tavern. The rain has stopped. Steam rises from the ground like breath. You share a piece of bread with another boy named Alfie. He's older, maybe 10. His hair cut short because it kept catching fire. He shows you the burn scars on his arm, pale against the black. It's not so bad, he says, shrugging. Could have been worse. You nod. You've both seen worse. The afternoon brings another series of houses. Some flues are so tight you have to twist your shoulders out of joint to fit. Others are slick with old soot that slides beneath your feet. Once, you slip halfway and catch yourself by your elbows. Your chest presses hard against the brick, knocking the air out of you. For a moment you can't breathe. The panic rises fast, a wild animal fear. But you hold still, forcing small breaths until it passes. When you finally crawl out, the master scolds you for taking too long. You apologize quietly. He doesn't strike you today, just mutters about lazy bones. You know better than to answer. The work continues until dusk. The light outside turns orange, then gray, then blue. By the time you finish the last house, the world feels muffled, as if everything is covered in soot, not just you. Your eyes sting. Your throat feels raw. But there's a strange rhythm to it all. Climb, scrape, slide, cough. A rhythm that fills the hours until they pass unnoticed. Back home, the lodging house is warm from the fire. The boys gather around a single candle. Some cough, others pick at their skin, where soot has rubbed it raw. The master drinks gin in the corner, half asleep in his chair. You sit with your back to the wall, your legs pulled close, and listen to the others talk in low voices. They talk about the machine sweeps, new brushes that can reach every part of a chimney from the bottom. Some say they'll put everyone out of work. Others say no one will pay for fancy machines when boys can do it cheaper. You don't know who's right. You just know your arms hurt, and tomorrow will be the same. One of the younger boys, barely 5, asks quietly, "Do we get paid soon?" The older ones laugh, not cruelly but softly, as if the question itself is naive. "The master gets paid," Alfie says. "We get food. That's how it is." The little one nods, though you can see he doesn't really understand. Later, as you lie down, the master's wife brings a basin of warm water. "For your knees," she says, her voice almost gentle. You dip a rag into it and wipe the black grime away. The skin underneath is raw, red, covered in small sores. She tuts softly, shaking her head. "They'll heal," she says. They always do. You're not sure if she believes that. When the candle burns out, darkness fills the room again. You listen to the quiet breathing of the others. Someone coughs, a deep rattle that doesn't stop. You close your eyes, tracing the pattern of pain in your shoulders, in your arms, in your chest. You wonder how long a body can last like this. You've heard of boys dying, falling from roofs, getting trapped in flues, burned when fires were lit too soon. The master calls those accidents. But sometimes you think it's the soot itself that kills. It gets inside you, layer by layer, until there's no clean breath left. The next morning, you're sent to a large house near Bloomsbury. The mistress there insists that her chimneys be cleaned weekly. She greets the master with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Make sure they don't leave a mess, she says. You bow automatically, though you're not sure she even sees you. The flue is unusually narrow, built more for elegance than practicality. You squeeze inside and start to climb. After a few feet, you feel the brick tighten around your chest. You exhale, flattening yourself against the wall, but it's still too tight. You push harder, twisting slightly. Your shirt snags. You pull again. For a terrifying moment, you're stuck. You try to call out, but your voice echoes weakly against the brick. Panic rises, the same panic you felt yesterday, sharper now. You push, then pull, scraping your arms raw against the sides. Finally, you wriggle free, tumbling downward a few feet before catching yourself. You can hear the master shouting below, "Keep going, ah." You take a slow breath, close your eyes, and force yourself upward again. By the time you reach the top, you're shaking. The air is thin. You push open the vent and see a sliver of sky, pale blue, edged with smoke. You rest there for a long time, just breathing. Then you begin the long slide down. That night, lying on the straw, you remember that tightness in the flue, the way the walls pressed around you. You think about how small you still are, and how the master says that's a good thing. You wonder what happens when you grow too big to fit. Some of the older boys disappear when that happens. No one says where they go. You stare at the ceiling, a patchwork of wood beams and soot stains, and listen to the rain. The city beyond the window hums faintly, endless in its work, its smoke, its noise. Somewhere out there, machines are being built to replace you. Somewhere, men are arguing about laws and morals and child labor. But here, in this small dark room, none of that feels real. What's real is the ache in your ribs, the rasp in your lungs, and the smell of soot that never fades. Tomorrow, you'll climb again, because that's what there is. Up, scrape, slide, sleep. A cycle of black dust and cold mornings, broken only by the sound of rain on rooftops. And yet, deep down, you wonder if one day the chimneys no longer need you. Will anyone remember the boys who once cleaned them from the inside? You wake to sunlight for once. It slips through the cracks in the shutters, cutting pale stripes across the stone floor. For a moment you don't move. The light feels strange, too gentle, too warm. You hear the other boys stirring, coughing, shifting in their blankets. The master hasn't called yet. Maybe he's still asleep. Maybe, for a few quiet minutes, you can just breathe. The air smells faintly cleaner today. Rain must have fallen during the night, tamping the soot down into the gutters. You sit up slowly, your back stiff, your skin sore from yesterday's scrapes. Every muscle seems to carry the memory of brick and smoke. You stretch, wincing, and the movement stirs a small cloud of black dust from your clothes. Even your hair is streaked with grey ash that never fully washes out. In the corner, Alfie is mending a brush, replacing bristles that have worn down to stubs. His fingers move quickly, skillfully, though his nails are rimmed with black. "They'll last another week," he says, softly, not looking up. "After that, we'll need new ones." You nod. Tools wear out faster than people. though it never feels that way. The master finally enters, coat already buttoned, hat in hand. "No work today," he says. The client's gone to the country. The boys exchange quick, uncertain glances. A free day isn't common. You don't quite know what to do with it. The master gestures toward the door. "Make yourselves useful. Fetch coal, mend brushes. Keep out of trouble." So you step outside into the morning air, blinking against the brightness. The street is alive in its usual way, vendors shouting, carts clattering, dogs darting between wheels. You feel oddly separate from it all, as if watching a scene you don't belong to. The air, though cleaner than the soot-blackened attics you work in, still tastes faintly of smoke. You decide to walk toward the river. The Thames moves sluggishly under a sky of pale grey, its surface streaked with oil and ash. Barges drift by, loaded with coal, timber, barrels of fish. Men in shirt sleeves haul ropes, their faces as lined and tired as the river itself. You watch them for a long time, wondering what kind of work that is. Hard, but in the open air. Work that doesn't crawl through walls. Near the bridge, a crowd has gathered around a notice board. You squeeze closer. The paper posted there is new, the ink still crisp. An Act for the Regulation of Chimney Sweepers, 1840. You sound out the words slowly in your head. You can't read most of them, but one line stands out. The numbers. Under the age of 10, it says. Prohibited. Someone beside you laughs, a short, dry sound. "Won't change a thing," he mutters. "They've said it before." Another man spits into the gutter. "They'll still send the boys up," he says. "Too small for the machines, too cheap to replace." You stare at the notice, not fully understanding. A law, they say. A rule that says boys like you shouldn't climb anymore. But you know laws are like smoke, visible for a moment, then gone. The master needs the work. The homeowners need their chimneys clean. And the chimneys themselves don't care who climbs them. Still, as you turn away, something feels different. A small spark of possibility you can't quite name. You spend the afternoon near Covent Garden, where the air smells of fruit and horses. Women in shawls sell apples from wooden carts. Street musicians play violins with strings patched from twine. You sit on a crate and watch them, feeling a rare stillness settle in your chest. The market hums with the kind of life that never reaches the alleyways you sleep in. An older woman notices you and frowns. "You one of them sweeps?" she asks. You nod, uncertain whether that's good or bad. She sighs and hands you a bruised pear. "Eat it, love. Can't have you fading to soot altogether." Her kindness startles you. You take the pear, thank her softly, and eat it slowly, savoring every bite. It's the sweetest thing you've tasted in months. When the sky begins to darken, you head back toward the lodging house. The city's lamps flicker to life one by one, small pools of gold against the fog. You pass other children huddled near doorways, some barefoot, some asleep sitting up. You wonder if they too crawl through chimneys, or if their work is something else entirely. The thought makes you walk faster. That night, the master reads the notice aloud, his voice thick with skepticism. "Aye, they're saying no boy under 10 to climb. Fines for anyone caught. But who's gonna check, eh? None of them inspectors come down here." He takes a long drink from his cup and shakes his head. They talk about machines, but the machines cost money. Boys don't. The room falls silent. You can feel the weight of the words settle over everyone. The little one, Tom, whispers, "Does it mean we stop?" The master laughs, not unkindly but tired. "Means nothing, lad. You'll climb till I say otherwise." You lie awake long after the others sleep. The candle has burned out. In the darkness, you imagine a world where chimneys clean themselves, where no one has to crawl through walls. You try to picture what that would look like, but your mind can't quite build it. All you can see are rooftops and smoke and the endless black space inside the flues. Weeks pass. The work continues, though slower now. Some houses begin hiring the machine men with their long rods and brushes. You watch them from across the street once, a man turning a crank, his brush spinning deep inside the chimney. He wears clean clothes, white cuffs showing at his wrists, no soot on his face. He doesn't cough once. The master grumbles about them constantly. Takes twice as long, costs twice as much. Not half as thorough, he says. But you can see something in his eyes, a flicker of worry. He knows change is coming, even if he won't admit it. One evening, you're sent to deliver tools to a smith in Holborn. On the way back, you pass a procession, a funeral. The coffin is small, too small. Someone whispers that it's a sweeps boy. Stuck in a flue, they say. Couldn't get him out in time. The master used to say that sort of thing was rare. But you've heard too many names now, boys who don't return. You stop and watch as the cart rolls past, the coffin draped in black cloth. For a moment, you think about your own name carved into wood. Then you turn away. By the next spring, the work has changed. More clients demand the machines. The master finally buys one, though he swears under his breath as he learns to use it. You and the others still climb sometimes. Older chimneys, crooked ones the brushes can't manage. But less often now. You can feel the difference in your body. Fewer cuts, fewer burns, more time to breathe. One afternoon, the master hands you a bundle of rods. Learn this, he says. You're getting too big for the small flues. The words land strangely, both relief and uncertainty. Too big. You've waited years to hear that, but you don't know what comes next. You practice with the rods in the yard, twisting them together, turning the brush through an old pipe. It's strange work, done from the ground, with light all around you. You can see what your hands are doing. You can breathe. For the first time, you notice how blue the sky can look when it isn't filtered through smoke. Still, the soot lingers, in your lungs, in your skin, in the lines of your palms. Even when you're no longer climbing, it follows you like a shadow. Some nights, you wake coughing, tasting iron. Alfie says it'll pass, but you're not sure. You've seen older sweeps who never stop coughing, even years after they quit. The doctors have a name for it now, soot wart. They say it's a kind of cancer. You don't know the word, but you understand the meaning. In time, you find other work, carrying coal, later tending fires in a factory. The pay is small, the air just as dirty, but at least you stand upright. You grow taller, broader. The flues that once trapped you could no longer hold you if they tried. You pass chimney sweeps sometimes, boys smaller than you used to be. Some still climb, though fewer every year. The machines spread through the city like new growth, slow but certain. Each one replaces a boy. Each one erases a little of what you once were. By the 1870s, no child climbs chimneys in London anymore. The law has finally taken hold, enforced at last. Inspectors visit, fines are paid, masters retire. The work becomes mechanical, impersonal. The soot still falls, but no small hands scrape it loose. The world moves on, as it always does. No one remembers your name, not the masters, not the homeowners, not the lawmakers. You were one of thousands, unseen, unsung, and soon forgotten. But the city you helped keep from burning still stands. Its rooftops still rise against the fog. Its hearths still warm the homes within. Sometimes, on quiet nights, you imagine the chimneys whispering. You can almost hear the scrape of brushes inside, the echo of children's breath. You wonder if the soot remembers, the warmth of small bodies pressing through darkness, the rhythm of survival. Maybe memory clings like soot, invisible, but never gone. So as you lie there now, older, lungs heavy but heart steady, you think back to the climb, the weight, the darkness, the brief rush of air at the top. You think of the rooftops spread wide beneath the sky, of a city that once depended on children to keep its fires alive. And perhaps, in some quiet way, that was its own kind of endurance. Not heroism, not rebellion, just the simple persistence of breath, grind, drawn one more time through lungs full of ash. Close your eyes. Let the smoke drift away. Let the rooftops fade into mist. And rest now, because the climb is finally over. Congratulations. You just woke up in London again, but this time, the year is 1893. You are not a chimney sweep, you are, outwardly at least, respectable. The morning sun is filtered through lace curtains that turn the light pale and cold. The room smells faintly of starch and lavender water. The air is still. Somewhere downstairs, a servant pokes at the fire in the drawing room grate, so that it will appear to have been burning all night. You lie still beneath a heavy quilt, listening. The first sound in any proper household is movement, not speech. Footsteps on carpet, the whisper of skirts, the soft rattle of the scuttle. Words come later, after tea. You wait until you hear the bell strike 8, then you rise. There is a right way to do everything. The morning itself has rules. You must not open your curtains all the way full sunlight is considered vulgar before breakfast. You must not call for your maid before she has had time to bring hot water. You must certainly not appear at table in your nightclothes. The routine is a choreography you have known since childhood. Slippers on the rug, dressing gown tied, hair brushed precisely 100 strokes. You wash in a porcelain basin, whose water cools too quickly, leaving your hands faintly red. The soap smells of carbolic acid, sharp and clean. Cleanliness, after all, is next to godliness, and godliness next to respectability. Your maid knocks softly. Hot water, ma'am. You thank her, though you were taught not to use a servant's name unless necessary. Familiarity blurs the line between service and equality blurs everything. The house depends on those lines being straight. By 8:30 you are dressed in a corseted gown of dark blue wool. It weighs nearly 15 pounds. The corset laces bite against your ribs, forcing your back straight and your breathing shallow. You check your reflection. Hair pinned, collar stiff, expression calm. Appearances are moral statements here. To look untidy is to be thought unreliable. Downstairs, breakfast waits under silver domes, eggs cooling quickly, toast gone limp in its rack, tea already too strong. You take your seat carefully, ankles crossed, hands folded until served. The newspaper lies beside your plate, folded so the servants can't read the scandal columns. You pretend interest in the shipping news. Your husband, if you have one, speaks of politics in a tone meant for public hearing. If you are unmarried, your father does. Either way, your role is silence with variation. The small nod, the polite murmur, the brief smile that proves attentiveness. Words are precious currency, and women of standing must spend them sparingly. After breakfast, the day divides into its proper fragments. Calls to be made, letters to answer, charities to attend. Each has a dress code, a script, a time limit. If you are a married woman, you manage the house by proxy. The servants take orders from you but must never see you idle. You record accounts in a neat hand, balancing the cost of coal against the number of visitors expected for tea. If you are unmarried, your work is lighter but stranger. a constant performance of potential. Your mornings revolve around being seen in the right places by the right people, while pretending not to notice who sees you. You might walk in Hyde Park after 11. Never before, only the lower classes walk early. The gravel paths crunch beneath your boots. You nod to acquaintances, but not too warmly. Gossip travels faster than carriages, and warmth can be misread as impropriety. Every glance has a rule. A gaze held too long at a stranger marks you forward. A laugh heard too loudly suggests looseness. Even gloves carry meaning. Cream before noon, grey or lavender after. Black only for morning. And morning itself comes with its own calendar. 6 months for a parent, a year for a spouse, 2 years if you wish to prove devotion beyond reproach. You pass rows of houses with polished brass knockers and drawn blinds. Behind each facade lies the same quiet tension, families holding themselves upright beneath invisible weights. Respectability is heavy, it must be carried carefully. At 11:30 you call upon Mrs. Pembroke, whose husband made his fortune in shipping. Her drawing room smells of violets and furniture polish. She greets you with the delicate handshake that society approves of, fingertips only, brief and cool. Conversation drifts through safe topics, weather, church bazaars, the Queen's latest appearance. You speak in phrases softened by uncertainty. I dare say one wonders, perhaps, to speak directly is dangerous. It implies conviction, and conviction invites argument. Better to seem agreeable, moderate, a creature of balance. Tea arrives on a tray carried by a maid in uniform. The silver rattles faintly, the cups are thin enough to see light through. You stir sugar carefully, without letting the spoon touch the sides, an unwritten rule, but one every child of your class learns before the age of 10. When you leave, you promise to call again next week. Whether you mean it or not is irrelevant. Promises in this world are ornamental, like lace, fragile, decorative, easily discarded when fashions change. Back home you write letters. The ink smells metallic, the paper crisp and thick. Each line must be even, each word measured. You sign yours most sincerely, never affectionately, unless blood demands it. Even sincerity has degrees. Outside, the clatter of carts echoes faintly through the street. You glance at the window but don't open it. Dust from the road might settle on the curtains. Cleanliness, again, is a matter of moral hygiene. A spotless home suggests a spotless conscience. Your maid enters to remind you of the afternoon calls. 3 visits, each precisely 15 minutes. Any longer, and you appear intrusive, any shorter, rude. The carriage smells of horsehair and damp wool as you ride through Kensington, nodding to acquaintances from behind glass. You feel both seen and invisible, an ornament moving through a carefully arranged display. Evening arrives slowly, as if weighed down by etiquette. You change gowns again, dinner silk, darker than day. The stays pull tighter, you learn to breathe in shallow sips. Candles are lit, mirrors multiply their light. Guests arrive precisely at 8. Conversation at dinner is a delicate negotiation of subjects. Politics, religion, and illness are forbidden. The weather, travel, art, and minor scandals are safe. Silence, if graceful, is better than risk. You listen more than you speak. You smile when expected. You lift the right glass with the right hand, sip, but never drain. The servants move like shadows. Each gesture of theirs mirrors a rule of yours. They must not meet your eye. You must not thank them aloud at table. Gratitude, like emotion, belongs to the private world. By 10, the guests depart. You feel the faint ache of ribs and shoulders released from posture. The air smells of candle wax and cooled meat. You climb the stairs slowly, one gloved hand on the rail, feeling every bone remind you that grace is effort made invisible. In your dressing room, the maid unlaces the corset. You exhale for the first time all day. Red marks trace your ribs, faint but deep. She brushes the dust from your gown, folds it, places it in the wardrobe where color and occasion dictate order. Morning, afternoon, evening, morning. You wash again in the porcelain basin. The water turns grey. You watch the dirt swirl down the drain and think of how much of life is like that mess, concealed beneath polish. You wonder, briefly, what it would be like to speak plainly, to laugh loudly, to walk without stays. The thought feels dangerous, so you let it drift away like steam. You slip into a white nightdress, soft against skin rubbed raw by whalebone. The sheets smell faintly of lavender and starch. From the street below comes the muffled rhythm of wheels and hooves, fading toward midnight. You think of all the people living within a few streets, the servants asleep below stairs, the clerks counting coins by lamplight, the women who sew until dawn to finish the gowns you'll wear next week. Society feels solid from the outside, but inside, its threads pull tight, one break, and the pattern unravels. Tomorrow will begin the same way. Lace curtains, cold basin, careful silence. You will rise again into the ritual of restraint, a quiet endurance mistaken for elegance. And perhaps you'll wonder, just for a moment, whether anyone truly likes the rules, or if everyone is simply afraid of what happens without them. Morning again. You wake before the maid knocks, out of habit. The air in your room is cold, carrying the faint scent of coal smoke that leaks through every seam in the house. For a moment you lie still, listening to the sounds of the household rising, the kitchen range being lit, the scuttle scraping, the dull rhythm of someone polishing brass in the hall. Life here begins in whispers. When the water arrives, you wash quickly and begin the familiar layering of fabric and constraint. Chemise, stays, petticoats, gown, collar. The corset feels tighter today. Perhaps the maid drew the laces a touch more firmly, or perhaps your body simply protests a repetition. Still, the mirror insists on perfection. To be seen as careless, even once, is to invite whispers that never quite fade. You descend the stairs, feeling the weight of fabric drag slightly at your hips. In the dining room, the smell of toast and coffee mingles with yesterday's ash. You take your seat, unfold your napkin, and greet your husband with the same words you used yesterday and the day before that. Conversation at breakfast is not about content but rhythm, a daily ritual to prove that nothing is out of order. He asks about your plans. You mention letters, calls, perhaps the charity committee. He nods, half listening. The two of you exchange civility like coins. Real emotion, if it exists, is locked away beneath etiquette, too risky to spend. After breakfast, you move to the morning room. The walls are papered in a pale green damask that seems to absorb sound. A small clock ticks softly on the mantelpiece. You take your seat at the escritoire and begin correspondence. The ink blots easily on cold mornings. You keep the nib steady. Letters are the lifeblood of this world, each one a performance. You thank Mrs. Pembroke for her hospitality, express mild interest in the bazaar at St. Anne's, assure Lady Merton that her cousin's recovery gives you genuine pleasure. The word genuine feels strange under your hand, as though sincerity itself requires formal permission. When the letters are done, you review the household accounts. There is always coal to order, wages to approve, linen to replace. Each column of figures represents invisible labor, women and men who exist within the house but rarely within conversation. You manage them by routine and by distance. The house, like society, runs best when emotion is excluded from the mechanism. By 11, the maid brings your bonnet and gloves. You're to visit a draper on Regent Street for a fitting. Outside, the fog has thickened. a grey wall that smells of soot and damp wool. Carriages move slowly, lamps glowing faintly in the haze. The streets are crowded, but the social distance between classes remains vast. From your carriage window, you see the people who make your comfort possible. Errand boys darting between wheels, flower sellers calling through the smoke, laundresses carrying baskets heavier than they are. You avoid eye contact, though you can't help noticing the raw redness of their hands. The city is built on hands like those. Yours, by contrast, remain gloved and pale, unblemished by touch. Inside the shop, gaslights burn even at midday. Bolts of silk gleam on the counter, blues and violets and dull greens that shift with the light. The clerk bows slightly. You select 2 yards for an evening gown and another for trimming, aware that the transaction itself is part of a larger theatre. Your tone must be polite, but firm, your posture graceful, but not intimate. Every gesture is performance. Even the act of choosing fabric becomes a reflection of class, restraint, and moral standing. The Victorians believed that taste revealed virtue, that an eye for subtlety proved moral refinement. It is an exhausting belief to live under. You return home to find a card on a silver tray. Miss Collingridge called at 12:30. She is new in town, recently engaged, and her visit demands a return. You sigh softly, not in complaint exactly, but in recognition of how the web tightens. By afternoon, the fog has lifted slightly. The maid arranges your shawl, and you set out again. Miss Collingridge lives with her aunt, a woman who compensates for modest means with endless propriety. The drawing room smells of dust and violets. You sit for exactly 20 minutes, discussing the weather and the concert at St. James's Hall. Miss Collingridge speaks too quickly, her excitement betraying inexperience. Her fiancé works in the Foreign Office, she mentions it often. You smile, nod, and file her enthusiasm away, as youth forgivable but dangerous. In time she will learn that happiness, like hunger, must be concealed. When you rise to leave, she presses you to stay for tea. You decline gently. To linger would be impolite. It would suggest that your schedule is empty. The value of your time is measured by its scarcity. Evening brings the weekly gathering at Lady Beauchamp's townhouse. You dress in mauve silk, understated elegance, fashionable but not forward. The bodice pinches slightly at the waist, you breathe carefully. The Beauchamp's salon is a study in quiet control. Candles flicker in sconces, polished silver reflects their light, and the air hums with restrained conversation. The men cluster near the brandy, the women form half circles around the piano. Lady Beauchamp insists that music elevates the soul. In truth, it fills the silence between expectations. A young woman performs a piece by Mendelssohn, each note precise, emotion carefully contained within measure. You clap lightly when it ends. Later, you join a conversation about travel, a safe topic, suitably neutral. One gentleman recounts his visit to India, describing the exotic colors of Calcutta, with the confidence of someone who has never questioned empire. The others nod approvingly. To express unease would be gauche to express admiration, essential. You listen, smile, and feel the faint dull ache of constraint. Words pass through the room like polite ghosts, visible, fleeting, without weight. When the clock strikes 11, the guests begin to leave. Outside, the fog has returned, softening the gaslight into halos. You step into the carriage, exhausted by composure. The city feels strangely hollow, as though everyone is acting from the same unwritten script. Back home, the house is quiet. The servants have finished their duties and retired below stairs. You remove your gloves and stare at the faint creases they leave, pale bands of confinement around your wrists. It occurs to you that even skin bears traces of obedience. In your dressing room, the maid begins to unlace the corset. The air feels thin, your ribs expanding reluctantly. She moves without speaking, trained to discretion. Servants hear everything and repeat nothing, the most valuable form of silence in Victorian England. You catch your reflection in the mirror, the careful arrangement of hair, the faint lines at your temples, the exhaustion disguised as poise. It's hard to tell where the person ends and the performance begins. That night, sleep comes slowly. Your mind drifts through the day's rules, gestures corrected, tones adjusted, emotions trimmed to fit social measure. The discipline of manners is so complete that even thoughts arrive in polite form. You wonder when you last spoke freely, without calculation. In dreams, the city dissolves into endless corridors of parlors and drawing rooms, each identical, each filled with people smiling just enough. You wake before dawn, heart steady, but mind restless. The next morning brings a small disruption. A neighbor's daughter, a girl barely 20, has eloped with a clerk from her father's office. The news spreads like perfume through the district. You hear it whispered by the milkman, repeated by your maid, confirmed in a note from Mrs. Pembroke. Shocking conduct. Such a pity for the family. You feel both scandalized and fascinated. The girl's defiance will ruin her socially, yet some quiet part of you envies the freedom implicit in her folly. She will be exiled from drawing rooms, but she will breathe without corsets. The thought lingers like an illicit scent. At luncheon, your husband mentions the scandal with practiced disapproval. Disgraceful, utter lack of breeding. You murmur agreement, though your tone is measured, cautious. Even sympathy must be disguised as judgment here. The day continues. Letters, errands, calls. You attend a church committee meeting where 5 women discuss the correct design for an embroidered altar cloth. The conversation lasts 2 hours. Every suggestion is softened by courtesy. Every disagreement hidden in phrases like "one wonders if perhaps you're merchant." This is how conflict survives under manners. Disguised, diluted, never spoken directly. The Victorian ideal of harmony depends upon repression. Real emotion is not eliminated, it is merely displaced, finding expression in fainting spells, nervous disorders, and quiet melancholies that physicians struggle to name. In the afternoon, you visit your tailor for a fitting. The pins prick faintly at your waist. The seamstress apologizes, her hands trembling slightly. You tell her it's nothing, though the pain reminds you that even beauty requires injury. She smiles weakly, unused to kindness. Her face is pale, her eyes red-rimmed. You realize she likely works 14 hours a day for less than the cost of your gloves. You wish to say something, to thank her, to acknowledge her, but the etiquette of class forbids it. Gratitude, like guilt, is private. As dusk falls, you walk briefly in the garden. The air is sharp with autumn. The sky, bruised grey, glows faintly behind chimneys. For a moment, the stillness feels almost sacred, an escape from performance. You breathe deeply, corset straining against your ribs. From somewhere nearby, church bells mark the hour. Their sound lingers in the air like a memory. You think again of the eloped girl, of what her new life might feel like. Freedom, you suspect, is quieter than people imagine. Perhaps it feels like this cool air, open sky, no eyes watching. Then the moment fades. The maid calls from the doorway. Supper will be served soon. You turn back toward the house, toward routine, toward the familiar architecture of rules that keep the world intact. You do not resent them exactly. They protect as much as they confine. In a society held together by reputation, Boundaries are safety. And yet, walking through the doorway, you can't help but feel that something vital remains outside, something you no longer know how to name. Night has already fallen when you finally rest. The drawing room is dark, except for the faint glow of embers in the grate. The house is quiet, save for the occasional creak of settling timbers or the soft rustle of lace curtains brushing the floor. You feel the weight of the day's composure pressing against your shoulders. Another day spent practicing precision in speech, posture, and thought. You walk slowly to your dressing room, unbuttoning gloves one finger at a time, feeling the leather yield beneath your hands. The corset comes next. You unlatch it carefully, then undo the laces, letting your chest expand in shallow, grateful breaths. The relief is small but immediate. Your body remembers freedom in the spaces between the rules, even if your mind struggles to claim it. You sit by the mirror, brushing your hair slowly. The reflection is familiar and strange at once. The same carefully arranged features, the same polite composure, but something flickers in your eyes. It is the hint of curiosity, of longing, something the Victorians tried to classify as delicate sensibility, but which you recognize as awareness. Awareness of possibility beyond the prescribed life. In the weeks that follow, the rhythms of society continue, but small fissures appear in the facade. A visitor dares a witticism that borders on sarcasm. A servant mutters a complaint and is lightly chastised, but not dismissed. Letters arrive with news of distant relatives scandalized, unrepentant, or quietly happy. The rigidity of the world is not total. There is room, just enough, for unpredictability. One morning, you receive a note from Miss Collingridge, the young woman who recently arrived in town. She writes not about tea or fashion, but about a small garden she has planted behind her aunt's house. She describes the colors, the soil, and the smell of earth in a way that feels alive, unsanitized, immediate. You read the letter twice. You feel a small thrill, a private connection, unmediated by expectation. Later that day, you notice a neighbor leaving a back gate unlocked for a child returning from errands. The lapse is minor, barely visible, yet it unsettles the balance you have internalized. You watch the child skip home through the alley, and something within you stirs. A faint, unpracticed recognition that not all order is mandatory, that not all rules are eternal. Social events continue, though differently now. A visiting aunt sits slightly out of line in the drawing room. Her fingers twitch with impatience. A gentleman forgets to remove his hat during conversation. Each small deviation causes a ripple, quiet gasps, sideways glances, polite coughs, yet also a subtle relief. The world has begun to bend around itself in ways no etiquette manual could anticipate. At a charity meeting, a young woman dares to suggest a minor reform in funding distribution. It is a tiny challenge, almost invisible, but the idea is accepted. People nod, half wondering, half relieved. The structure survives, yet acknowledges a minor shift. Society, you realize, is more flexible than the rigid rules suggest. It is, in some quiet way, alive. You begin to notice your own reactions. You laugh quietly at missteps, a servant's clumsy entry, a guest's abrupt tone. You find yourself adjusting your own gestures in response to these breaches. You realize that manners are not only confinement, they are also negotiation. They allow a person to exist within the bounds of order, yet still practice choice in private. Even the small rebellions, a foot left bare for a few minutes, a slight delay in bowing, a muted sigh, carry significance. Each act is tiny, but together they form an undercurrent. Life is not suspended in these rules, it flows quietly alongside them. You begin to sense that people have always found ways to stretch the boundaries without breaking the surface. By midsummer, small changes ripple through your daily routine. You speak more freely in letters. You allow yourself a second cup of tea without formal justification. You linger slightly longer in the drawing room after visitors depart. Each adjustment is minor, almost imperceptible, yet it feels like reclaiming a fragment of self. Outside, the city reflects a similar shift. Street vendors call out with increasing vigor, unafraid of polite disapproval. The fog seems thinner in some neighborhoods, the streets less formal, the children bolder. It is not revolution, far from it, but a quiet evolution of life lived between the cracks of expectation. You watch a young woman walking alone along the Thames embankment. Her hat is slightly askew. Her gait is unmeasured. She smiles at a man carrying a basket of fish, and he tips his cap without hesitation. The world allows these small gestures, these glimpses of unscripted life. The city endures not because rules are obeyed perfectly, but because people navigate them with care, imagination, and discretion. The pattern is clear. The rules themselves are not the enemy. They provide structure, predictability, a shield from chaos. Yet the gaps, the corners unpolished, the gestures unchecked, reveal something vital, that humans can endure structure without being wholly contained by it. That even in a society so fixated on appearances, there is room for authenticity, if quietly expressed. You spend a late afternoon alone in the garden behind your house. The roses are in bloom, their scent drifts softly in the warm air. You kneel to adjust a loose branch. The soil feels alive beneath your fingers, dark, fragrant, unpolished. For a moment, you forget the weight of social expectation, the subtle choreography of words and posture, the endless calculation of propriety. It is a fleeting freedom, yet enough to remind you that life is not solely what is dictated. Rules can guide, but they cannot fully govern. And the small acts of improvisation, the private rebellions, the moments of laughter and silence, carry meaning far deeper than any polished courtesy. That evening, you sit by candlelight and write in your private journal, a practice no one else knows about. You record observations without censor, thoughts without editing. You write about the eloped girl, the servant's soft rebellion, the misaligned hat on the Thames embankment. You note the feeling of sun on your hands and the scent of earth in the garden. Each sentence is a breath of freedom, tucked between layers of propriety. The house is quiet, the servants have retired. Outside, lamps glow softly in the fog. You close your eyes for a moment and feel the tension leave your shoulders, the weight of expectation dissolve into the night air. You are still part of the rules, still performing, still visible to the world. Yet you have discovered, as everyone must, eventually, that life always slips between them, quietly, persistently, and without fanfare. Over the following months, the subtle cracks widen. Young women begin to attend concerts alone. Men linger slightly longer at tea. Children skip steps in formal greetings. These small deviations do not topple society, they humanize it. The world is still governed by manners, but it becomes more bearable because its inhabitants learn to navigate it with discretion and small gestures of selfhood. You notice it in yourself, a faint sense of agency, a slight ease in posture, a willingness to allow imperfection in the carefully ordered lives around you. There is still fear of gossip, still concern for reputation, still the constant awareness that eyes are watching. But there is also a quiet courage in recognizing that rules are tools, not shackles, guides, not masters. As the candle burns down, you reflect on the day's small victories. The garden is tended, letters are written without forced phrasing. A visitor is entertained with gentle curiosity rather than calculated restraint. The world outside remains ordered, yet you feel the pulse of life threading through it, invisible but persistent. Tomorrow you will rise again, lace the stays, smooth the skirt, pour the tea, meet the calls, attend the drawing room. You will follow etiquette, carefully, deliberately, gracefully. But somewhere in the margins, in gestures small and fleeting, the human spirit persists. And that persistence is enough. Close your eyes, let the lace, the corset, the unspoken rules all drift away for a while. The garden, the fog, the small freedoms, they remain. Breathe in, breathe out, and rest. Congratulations! You just woke up in a small frontier town somewhere in the American West, circa 1875. The first thing you notice is the air, dry, thin, and prickly against your lungs. It smells faintly of sagebrush and horse sweat, with a hint of coal smoke from the few stoves already burning in the cabins. The town itself is scattered along a dirt road, wooden buildings leaning slightly in the wind, doors unhinged or swinging. You can hear the morning birds, not the familiar songbirds from back east, but the sharp clipped calls of sparrows and meadowlarks, alert to predators. You rise on a thin straw mattress, rough against your back. The blanket is stiff with dried sweat from yesterday's sun, still warm from your body, but rough enough to scratch. A lumpy pillow offers little comfort. You swing your legs to the floor and feel grit between your toes. The town's dust creeps everywhere, carried by the wind and footsteps alike. There is no bell to signal dawn. The sun climbs slowly, and the first sound you hear beyond the walls of your cabin is a distant whistle. A train, perhaps, or the call of a ranch hand already out among the cattle. You are not safe from the noise, nor is anyone. Here, sound precedes action, and it is always urgent. Your first chore is water. A barrel sits outside, the rainwater murky and tepid. You dip a tin cup in and lift it to your lips, tasting iron and dust. It is all you have for the morning. Nearby, a horse shifts in its stall, stamping hooves. You smell the animal sharply, the mix of sweat, hay and manure burning your nostrils. Even in the first hour of the day, your senses are assaulted. Breakfast is simple, hardtack and bacon if you are lucky, or coffee that tastes faintly of soot from the stove. The bacon is salty, grease soaking through thin slices of bread. You chew mechanically, aware that calories are the only real currency in this town. Every bite is a transaction, energy in for survival out. The town itself wakes slowly. Women hang laundry outside to dry in the wind, though it whips it into dirt almost immediately. Children run barefoot across the street, kicking up dust and occasionally cursing when it gets in their eyes. Men move toward the saloon or the blacksmith. Every person has a role, and you can tell almost instantly who will survive the day and who will not. The weak, the slow, the inattentive are weeded out by routine and by accidents. You step outside your cabin, the wind bites at your face, lifting dust and grit. Wooden sidewalks have been laid in front of most stores, though many have rotted under the sun. You adjust your hat against the glare. The sky is enormous and pale, stretching endlessly above the dusty street. The saloon already smells of whiskey and sweat. You hear the faint clink of glasses, the scraping of stools across rough floorboards. A piano plays a few notes somewhere in the back, Someone practicing, perhaps, or someone trying to drown the dust in music. Children peek inside but are rarely allowed to enter. Rules exist, but only loosely, enforced unevenly by whoever carries a gun that day. You hear shouts from the blacksmith shop down the road, hammer on anvil, sparks flying. Horses snort in the stables behind the shop. The smell of hot metal and horse sweat mixes in a thick haze, sharp in your nose. Even a short exposure makes you cough. You adjust your scarf to cover mouth and nose, though it will do little against the grit. If you are employed in town, your day begins with immediate physical labor. Perhaps you work on the railroad, shoveling coal into the engine's furnace, moving earth under the sun until your skin bleaches in harsh lines. Perhaps you tend cattle, guiding them across open range, feeling hooves kick up clouds of dirt, and dealing with unpredictable animals that weigh 1,000 pounds and have minds of their own. If you are a shopkeeper or saloon worker, the danger is subtler, but equally pressing. Guns are present in almost every transaction, carried openly. Arguments over prices, gambling, or perceived slights escalate quickly. In one misstep, you could leave the establishment with a knife in your side. You cannot ignore anyone, but you must also maintain caution, always calculating the social and physical risks of every glance, every word, every gesture. Even for children, survival requires vigilance. They fetch water, run errands, herd animals, or deliver messages between cabins. The smallest mistake, a dropped pail, a misjudged step, a horse that startles, can be fatal. Each day is a negotiation with the natural world, with humans, and with chance itself. You walk past the general store. Barrels of flour and sugar sit outside, attracting flies. The door creaks as it swings in the wind. The store smells of dust, rope, and preserved meat. The owner eyes you warily. Even a glance here can be interpreted as interest or insult. Manners exist, but they are layered over necessity, enforced less by etiquette and more by brute survival. Children cluster in the street, kicking up more dust, chasing a loose chicken or rolling hoops. Their clothes are torn, patched, often too small or too large, depending on who can provide for them. Most wear hats to shade their eyes, but some are bareheaded, squinting against the bright sun. You notice one boy, barely 10, carrying a bucket of water that sloshes dangerously. He is careful, slow, aware. One misstep and the dust or mud could knock him over. One wrong movement in the West can end a day or a life. A dog scurries by, chasing a rat. Its coat is matted. Its jaws snap. It belongs to no one but itself, yet it survives better than many humans in town. By mid-morning, the sun climbs high and heat radiates from the dirt streets. Sweat stings in your eyes. Dust scratches the inside of your throat. You have already swallowed grit, you realize, almost without noticing. Horses stand tethered in the shade, flies swarming around their ears. Children wander underfoot, oblivious, careful, lucky, or reckless. The sound of a whip cracking, a bell ringing, a man shouting across the street, these become background noise, but every sound demands attention. The wind carries stories. A stagecoach robbed outside of town. A rancher's barn burned in the night. A traveling preacher who upset someone with words. Rumor is not idle chatter here. It is survival. Knowing what has happened, even vaguely, allows people to navigate danger. Ignorance is costly. If you attempt to ignore these rhythms, you are already behind. A misjudged movement, a delayed response, or misplaced confidence will cost you, either materially or physically. You realize quickly that the West is not a place for hesitation. It is an environment of relentless pressure. where humans must adapt constantly to the demands of the land, the animals, and each other. You pass the sheriff's office. Inside, a single officer polishes his revolver. The smell of gun oil mixes with old tobacco and leather. He watches the street through a narrow window. His eyes are sharp, trained, alert. He intervenes in disputes only when absolutely necessary. Law exists, but it is uneven, selective, and swift when applied. Justice is rarely deliberated, it is enforced, often violently, often immediately, and always inconsistently. A stagecoach rattles down the street, loaded with passengers and mail. Dust rises in waves. The horses snort. The driver cracks his whip, shouting orders that are lost in the clatter. You are pushed aside against the nearest building to avoid being struck. The adrenaline rush is sharp, and your heart pounds. Survival demands constant alertness. By noon, your stomach reminds you of its presence with a dull, persistent ache. Food is simple: a piece of bread, salted meat, perhaps an apple if someone is generous. Water is never enough, always slightly contaminated, slightly suspect. The heat and dryness of the day make swallowing difficult, your mouth dry with dust and sweat. You are aware of every calorie and every drop of moisture. There is no waste in this environment. You notice a rancher tying down a wagon load of hay, sweat dripping down his face. A group of men are arguing about a stolen horse in the street. Someone walks by, carrying a rifle casually across their back. Another boy is chasing a goat, barefoot, laughing, oblivious to the danger of nails, rocks, or wandering cattle. Every movement, every breath carries weight. The town itself is a delicate balance between human effort and environmental hazard. Buildings are crude, mostly wood and canvas. Fires are common. Water is limited. Sun exposure burns skin quickly, yet is unavoidable. Animals, horses, cattle, dogs, follow their instincts, indifferent to human plans. And people, in the midst of it all, follow routines born of experience and necessity, not leisure. By mid-afternoon, you have already experienced a dozen minor scrapes, dust in your eyes, a stumble over uneven planks, a near collision with a horse, the sharp bark of a dog. Each incident leaves a faint mark, a reminder that caution is constant and survival is earned moment by moment. And yet somehow, the town endures. Buildings lean but stand. People sweat, shout, and bargain, continuing the rhythms of survival. The West is harsh, unyielding, and unforgiving, but it is also alive, vibrant in its cruelty, demanding of attention and respect. You find a shaded spot on a wooden sidewalk to sit briefly. Your hands are gritty, your throat dry, and your shirt stuck to your back with sweat. You watch dust swirl in the wind, sunlight bouncing off nails in the boards, and children run carelessly, yet skillfully, between horses and wagons. Survival here is measured not in comfort or safety, but in knowledge, awareness, and endurance. You realize, slowly, that one day, a single day, is enough to understand the West's relentless demand. To survive even 24 hours requires constant vigilance, adaptation, and luck. And still, chance looms over everything, indifferent and unavoidable. You shift slightly, feeling the heat radiate from the planks, the sun scorching the back of your neck. You notice the distant horizon, hills rising pale and dry against the sky. You sense how vast the landscape is, how small and fleeting each human life becomes beneath it. And in this moment, you understand the question that will haunt you. Could you endure this for longer than a single day? Could you navigate the dust, the heat, the grit, the danger, with nothing but awareness and stamina to rely upon? Or would you falter, as so many have, swallowed quietly by the demands of a place that has no patience for hesitation. Morning returns with a glare that feels sharper than yesterday. The sun is already high, and the wind carries grit that stings your eyes and scratches at your throat. The town is awake, more than awake, alert, tense, humming with activity. You notice how quickly every small movement demands attention. A swinging door, a loose plank, the clatter of a wagon. Each sound carries potential consequence. You begin the day with chores. Water must be drawn, horses fed, and tools inspected. Each task is repetitive yet crucial. The barrel you lift is heavy and smells faintly of algae. The horses paw at the ground impatiently, snorting and stamping. You feel the strain in your arms and back, muscles waking in protest. Every motion matters, because the slightest error, spilling water, leaving a gate unlatched, misjudging a horse's temper, could have consequences that last the rest of the day or longer. Breakfast is modest, usually bread, salted meat, or occasionally beans. Coffee is thin, sometimes bitter, always served hot to offset the cold of the early morning air. You eat standing at the counter of the cabin or sitting on a rough bench, hands sticky with sweat and dust. The combination of hunger, dryness, and heat presses on you, a constant reminder that sustenance is labor's reward, never guaranteed. By mid-morning, the town's rhythm intensifies. The blacksmith's hammer strikes the anvil. Sparks flying, the wheelwright adjusts a wagon wheel, sweat dripping down his brow. Horses snort and shift in the corral. The smell of hay and manure thick in the air. Every person, animal, and object is in motion, interacting in ways you must constantly anticipate. You walk along the street, careful to avoid loose boards, stray nails, and piles of sawdust. The town is crowded with activity. Children running errands, merchants calling out their wares, cowhands hauling supplies. Each encounter requires careful judgment. A misplaced gesture, a delayed response, a misread glance can lead to disputes or accidents. In the West, every small choice carries weight. Even social interactions demand vigilance. A trader at the general store may smile, but his eyes are calculating, measuring both trust and opportunity. The slightest insult, accidental or perceived, can escalate quickly. Guns, knives, or brute strength enforce consequences where law is distant. Manners exist, but they are a practical tool rather than a moral guide. Politeness is survival, not virtue. If you work with animals, the stakes increase. Cattle must be herded carefully. Horses need attention to prevent injury. One misstep can leave a person trampled, bruised, or worse. You observe the seasoned ranchers moving almost instinctively, hands on reins, feet shifting weight, eyes scanning the terrain, ears listening for signals. Their movements are efficient, deliberate, almost preternatural. You recognize that you cannot learn this skill overnight. It requires repetition, failure, and the constant attention of your senses. Children too are part of this system. They fetch water, tend small livestock, deliver messages. Their survival depends on awareness, stamina, and quick reflexes. One small mistake, a dropped bucket, a startled horse, a misjudged step, could end a life. The West is a place that educates its young through exposure and necessity, not textbooks or structured lessons. By midday, the sun is relentless. Sweat soaks clothing, and dust forms a thin crust on skin and hair. Water is scarce, and food is minimal. You notice how every ounce of effort is repaid by necessity. More water to fetch, more wood to chop, more animals to tend. Even resting is tactical. You seek shade when available, sit on boards instead of dirt, avoid exertion in direct sunlight. Each choice is calculated to conserve energy and minimize risk. The streets of the town are uneven and dusty. Horses leave deep impressions. Wagons grind along ruts, and wind shifts the dust into clouds. Each movement requires care. Avoid stepping into horse dung. Sidestep nails. Duck under swinging doors. The simplest misstep can lead to injury or humiliation. A slip in front of peers. A collision with a horse. A broken tool. Every person must internalize a mental map of the environment, constantly updating and recalculating. Social rules in this environment are equally rigorous, though subtle. Townsfolk measure status by experience, skill, and reputation, rather than wealth or refinement. A man known for steady hands with a gun commands respect. A woman who can milk cows, cook, and repair clothing earns acknowledgement. Even small lapses, laziness, arrogance, hesitation are noted and remembered. You see a group of cowhands gathered outside the saloon. They exchange greetings through nods, brief words, and gestures. Any display of weakness is avoided. Any display of strength, understated but visible, is admired. Humor, rough as it is, reinforces bonds, but cruelty and recklessness are punished, sometimes immediately, sometimes with social isolation. Survival here relies on balance, being strong enough to protect oneself, but careful enough to avoid unnecessary attention. By afternoon, exhaustion sets in. Your hands are raw from labor, your throat is dry from dust, your eyes water from the glare. Even the simplest tasks, hauling water, feeding animals, inspecting fences, require constant attention. Muscles protest. Minor injuries are ignored until they worsen. Skin burns in the sun. Cuts and scrapes risk infection in the absence of medicine. The West does not allow negligence. You notice the older ranchers moving with a practiced economy of motion, conserving energy, protecting themselves. They have internalized the rhythms of this environment, when to push, when to rest, when to anticipate danger. Their experience is the currency that buys survival. It cannot be taught quickly. You understand now why newcomers struggle and often fail. The West is not forgiving to the unpracticed, the inattentive, or the weak. Social hierarchy also affects daily life. Merchants, lawmen, and ranchers interact in a delicate balance. Everyone is aware of reputation and capability. A single rumor can affect employment, trade, or personal safety. Even children absorb this lesson early. Who to trust, who to avoid, how to behave around adults with power. Lessons here are learned in experience and observation, not in classroom lectures. Arguments often escalate quickly. A dispute over a horse or a debt can end in threats, fistfights, or gunfire. Violence is rarely formalized, but is always an option. People measure words, tone, and timing carefully. Survival requires reading situations instantly, anticipating reactions, and controlling emotion under pressure. By evening, the town begins to settle. Horses are tethered, fences repaired, goods secured. Labor has ended for the day, but fatigue hangs heavy. Your body aches, your throat is parched, and your hands are stiff. The dust is embedded in your skin, hair, and clothing. You notice how small mistakes accumulated through the day could have been fatal. The loose plank you avoided, the sudden movement of a horse you anticipated, the scuffle in the street you stepped away from. Survival is not heroic here. It is methodical, careful, and constant. Those who falter, even briefly, risk serious consequences. Nightfall arrives quietly. The saloon becomes lively with music and gambling, but the noise is a distraction rather than celebration. Firearms are visible on hips, knives glint in lamplight, shadows shift in alleys. A stranger walks the street, boots striking planks, eyes scanning faces. Everyone knows vigilance does not end at dusk. You return to the cabin, exhausted but alert. The straw mattress feels sharp and unforgiving. The air is still, but your body is too keyed to rest completely. You reflect on the day. Every choice, every step, every motion had mattered. Survival is learned in hours, enforced by danger, and measured in minor successes. The West rewards attentiveness and punishes error without hesitation. Even lying down, sleep comes in fits. You hear the distant howls of coyotes, the lowing of cattle, and the occasional clatter of a loose shutter in the wind. Dreams are thin and dry, reflecting dust, sun, and constant alertness. Your body, however fatigued, has adapted to the rhythm of vigilance, learning to anticipate hazards instinctively. By the time dawn returns, you will wake again to dust, wind, animals, and human unpredictability. Each day is a test, and even the experienced cannot be certain of success. The West is vast, beautiful, and unforgiving, a place where life is measured not by wealth or ambition, but by attention, skill, and endurance. Night falls in the frontier town, heavier and quieter than any night in the city. The sun dips behind distant ridges, casting long shadows across the dusty street. The wind shifts, carrying a faint scent of sagebrush and horse sweat. You sit outside your cabin, boots resting on the worn boards, listening to the subtle sounds of survival. A dog barking, cattle lowing in the distance, a wagon wheel creaking as someone secures it for the night. The first thought that strikes you is how small and fragile human life feels here. Every sound, every movement carries meaning, and the consequences of inattention are immediate. Unlike a structured society, where etiquette can shield you from danger, the West offers no protection except awareness, skill, and endurance. Mistakes are costly. A misjudged horse, a dropped bucket of water, a poorly balanced load of hay, all of these could have been fatal today. You replay the moments when fortune favored you, stepping aside from a runaway goat, noticing a loose plank before it broke underfoot, avoiding the sudden clash of fists between two cowhands. Survival is a mosaic of tiny successes, stitched together by constant vigilance. You recognize how quickly complacency can erode these gains. Even one day of distraction, looking away for a second, trusting the wrong person, underestimating the sun or dust, can undo all the work of weeks, months, or years. The frontier teaches humility. With every step it erases pride and leaves only experience and instinct. Yet life continues. The town is functional despite hardship. Horses are fed, fences repaired, goods stocked, and people move about, each aware of the invisible calculus of survival. Social interactions are strategic, but also human. A nod to a neighbor, a shared load of firewood, brief words of caution or advice. Community exists in practicality, not in sentimentality. Mutual dependence is survival, not kindness. You notice the strategies that allow people to endure here. They rise early, ration resources, anticipate problems, and observe everything with unblinking attention. They use repetition to build instinct, and they learn from mistakes, their own and others. Patience is as important as strength awareness, as vital as courage. Each day reinforces lessons in endurance, and each misstep reinforces them further. Children surprisingly adapt quickly. They navigate dusty streets, dodge livestock, carry messages, and tend chores with astonishing speed and caution. They learn from watching adults, mimicking gestures, absorbing routines, and internalizing rules that exist outside any written code. Survival here is taught less through instruction than through immersion. Those who cannot adapt, weak, inattentive, or careless, fade quietly, their absence noted in the hush of empty homes or the rumor of misfortune. Even women, whose roles might seem domestic by distant standards, engage with survival constantly. Cooking over open flames, tending gardens, managing livestock, washing clothing by hand, every task is heavy, repetitive, and demanding. Social expectations exist, but practicality dictates action. Comfort, health, and efficiency outweigh decorum. Those who fail to recognize this do not survive long. By dusk, you reflect on the fragile balance between chance and preparation. A wagon wheel may break, a horse may bolt, a storm may arise suddenly. Life in the West is never secure, never predictable. You observe an older rancher adjusting a fence in the fading light. His movements are deliberate, almost meditative, but alert. His experience has allowed him to internalize the environment, to anticipate its hazards, to endure where others falter. Survival is knowledge embodied, repetition ingrained, caution habitual. You consider your own day. Every moment required attention. Every step demanded anticipation. Every interaction, whether human or animal, was a calculation. Fatigue presses against your limbs. Your throat is dry, your hands stiff. Yet you survived. That in itself is a lesson. That vigilance, patience, and endurance, even under relentless stress, produce continuity. The West does not reward bravery alone, it rewards consistency. Night deepens, the wind shifts again, carrying the faint clatter of hooves on distant trails. Coyotes call to one another, the sound sharp and hollow. Somewhere, a gunshot cracks in the distance. You lie on the mattress of your cabin, exhausted but alert. Sleep is lighter here than in city life, interrupted by noises that could indicate danger. Your mind drifts to the day's events, the dust, the sun, the grit in your eyes, the narrow escapes. Each memory reinforces the unspoken rules of existence in this environment. You begin to understand the subtle hierarchy of survival. Experience counts, awareness counts, skill counts, and luck counts, often more than the others. Complacency is dangerous. Overconfidence is fatal. Even small advantages, familiarity with a horse, knowledge of the terrain, awareness of social tensions, determine whether one lasts the day or falls victim to circumstance. The town sleeps uneasily. Those who are asleep are safe only temporarily. Animals stir, weather changes, strangers wander. You lie quietly, thinking of all the hands that built this place. The ones that shoveled dirt, tended animals, crafted wagons, cooked meals, dug wells, built fences. Every act, repetitive and unglamorous, accumulates to create a functioning society in a hostile environment. It is the invisible labor, the quiet attention, and the unremarkable endurance that sustain life here. You think of the stories that circulate, not the heroic legends of gunfights and bank robberies, but the daily accounts of toil, accident, and improvisation. Those tales are quieter, less dramatic, yet they hold the truth of existence. Survival is rarely glorious, often exhausting, and entirely dependent on careful, consistent action. Morning will come again, and the cycle will repeat. You will wake to dust in your hair, the glare of sun, the smell of sweat and hay. You will lift water, feed horses, tend chores, observe interactions, and calculate risk. You will navigate social dynamics, anticipate hazards, and move cautiously through the streets. Life will demand attention constantly, and mistakes will continue to carry consequences. But you also understand that endurance is possible. that preparation and vigilance allow humans to live, even flourish, in an environment that is indifferent, harsh, and unpredictable. There is rhythm in repetition, safety in awareness, and even a strange comfort in the predictability of labor. You close your eyes, letting the dust of the day settle in your mind. You feel your body, sore and gritty, relax slowly. You are alive. You have survived. And in this survival, you sense the quiet, unspoken lesson of the frontier. Life demands attention, endurance, and humility. But even within its relentless constraints, small acts of care, foresight, and repetition preserve the possibility of tomorrow. Close your eyes. Feel the heat fade, the dust settle. The distant coyote's call grows soft. Rest. The West endures, and so do you, for now at least, until the dawn returns.
The ancient Italy, relations. You just woke up in a small peasant hut somewhere in Northern Europe, winter of the 14th century. The first thing you notice is the cold. It penetrates the thin walls of your hut, biting through layers of wool and linen. Smoke from the small hearth curls feebly upward, attempting to warm the space, but it barely reaches your toes. The smell of damp straw, wood smoke, and unwashed bodies mingles in the air, thick and persistent. Outside, snow rests on the low roof, settling quietly in silence. Your bed is little more than a pile of straw, lined with rags and scraps of fabric. You rise slowly, limbs stiff from the cold, joints aching from sleep spent on an uneven floor. The straw squeaks under weight, and you hear the faint groan of the timbers above, shifting under frost and snow. Even in the dim light of dawn, you notice the grey sky pressing down, low and heavy. Winter stretches endlessly, and the sun rises only briefly, offering little warmth or comfort. Frost clings to the edges of the small windows, etching delicate patterns on the glass. Your first task is water. The well outside may be frozen sometimes. Snow must be melted over the hearth. Water is precious, not simply for drinking, but for cooking and cleaning. You fill a pot carefully, aware that fuel is limited. Every scrap of wood burned must be weighed against its necessity, for if you waste fire, you risk freezing during the night. Breakfast is thin and simple. Porridge, perhaps flavored with a bit of salt or leftover grains. Bread, if you have any, is hard and dense. The flavors are muted, the calories modest. But every bite matters. The winter diet is austere. Fresh vegetables are scarce. Meat is a rare luxury, and fruits are often preserved poorly. Hunger is a constant companion, and you learn to manage it with small, regular meals that maximize energy while minimizing waste. You dress in layers of rough-spun wool, linen, and patched clothing. Cold seeps through every seam, and frostbite is not an uncommon threat. Gloves are often makeshift, boots crudely stitched, hats and hoods uneven but necessary. You protect exposed skin as best as you can, knowing that even a small lapse could result in frostbite or infection, conditions that could be fatal in a world without reliable medicine. Outside, the landscape is unyielding. Fields are buried under snow, rivers frozen, and animals scarce. Livestock huddle together, lowing quietly, seeking warmth. You must tend them carefully, feed, water, protect from cold and predators. A neglected animal risks death, and for a peasant family, livestock is survival itself. The smallest cow or goat lost in winter is a setback that can reverberate through the season. The village stirs slowly. Smoke curls from neighboring chimneys. The faint sound of chopping wood reaches you. Children wrap themselves in extra layers, carrying firewood,
helping with chores. Elderly villagers move carefully, leaning on sticks or companions, faces lined with experience and endurance. Everyone has a role, everyone participates. For the community's survival depends on coordination and mutual effort. You walk to the communal well, balancing a bucket over icy ground. Snow crunches beneath your boots. The wind bites through cloak and hat, carrying ice particles that sting your face. You watch neighbors performing the same ritual, and you sense how much effort goes into maintaining even the simplest routines. Survival is built on repetition, awareness, and physical labor. Once water is drawn, it must be carried back without spilling or freezing. You distribute small portions carefully for cooking, washing, and watering animals. The cold makes every task harder. Hands numb, breath misting in the air, you learn to pace yourself, conserving energy while performing necessary work. Breakfast follows. Porridge warms your body, though only briefly. You eat slowly, mindful of each bite, knowing that the next meal may be hours away. The hearth offers some comfort, but its flame is meager. Heat is precious. You adjust the fire, adding small twigs instead of large logs, prolonging warmth through careful attention. Daily life in winter is dominated by survival. Work must continue, even in bitter cold. You chop wood, fetch water, tend animals, repair fences, and prepare food. Every motion consumes energy, and every calorie is essential. Exposure to cold can sap strength quickly. You notice how experienced villagers move efficiently, chopping with rhythm, walking with purpose, avoiding wasted effort. Experience is survival here, and you recognize the difference between those who thrive and those who falter. Children participate early. They fetch wood, feed animals, and deliver messages or small parcels between huts. Every child learns the rhythms of work and observation, understanding that winter is unforgiving. One mistake, slipping on ice, dropping firewood, neglecting the animals, can have consequences for the family's survival. Lessons are absorbed through doing, repetition, and observation. By midday, exhaustion sets in. The cold drains strength even after minimal exertion. Hunger tugs at your stomach. You eat what you can, a hunk of bread, a spoonful of porridge, maybe a bit of preserved meat. Meals are brief, there is little time to linger. The sun barely warms the land, and shadows are long. Even brief exposure can be taxing. The village functions on rhythm and routine. Everyone moves deliberately, anticipating hazards. Ice on paths, snow-laden roofs, and the cold that saps energy are ever-present threats. Survival is cumulative. Every day's labor builds toward continued existence, and every oversight risks injury or frostbite, or even death. You tend the livestock next. Chickens are sheltered, cows huddle in pens. You inspect hooves and coats, ensuring they are clean, dry, and safe. Animals are lifelines in this harsh environment, sources of milk, meat, and labor. Protecting them is a daily, energy-intensive responsibility.
Communal work is dominated by preparation for the long night ahead. Wood must be chopped, fire tended, water stored. Families consolidate resources, communal sharing of fuel, small reserves of food, and careful management of clothing. Everything is rationed, measured, accounted for. Waste is a danger, because resources are finite, and failure means exposure, hunger, or frostbite. You notice neighbors reinforcing their huts. Roofs are patched to prevent drafts, doors tightened against the wind, gaps in walls stuffed with straw or rags. Even minor improvements make a difference between warmth and exposure. The village's collective labor protects individuals,
Yet survival is still deeply personal, dependent on your own vigilance and endurance. Evening falls quickly. Light fades under the grey winter sky. The hearth becomes the center of the hut. Fire is stoked, and the household gathers for the last meal of the day. Conversation is brief, practical. You discuss chores for tomorrow, the state of animals, and available food. Humor and distraction are scarce. Energy is conserved for necessity. The cold penetrates more keenly as night deepens. You bundle in blankets, keeping extremities covered. Hands, feet, and face are vulnerable. Even as you lie on straw, the cold seeps into your bones. Dreams, when they come, are muted by exhaustion and hunger, a reflection of survival rather than fantasy. Outside, wind rattles the huts and whistles through gaps in the village. Animals settle, but their warmth is precious and finite. A single failure, neglecting to close a door, failing to stack enough wood, can turn the night into a trial of endurance. Even experienced villagers remain alert, listening for signs of frost, collapse, or threat from animals. As you lie down, you reflect on the nature of winter survival. It is not heroic, it is not glamorous, it is repetitive, exhausting, and relentless. Yet there is rhythm, and there is method. Success is measured in continued warmth, full stomachs, and uninjured animals. Small victories accumulate quietly, often unnoticed, but they sustain life. You realize that survival is more mental than physical. Awareness, careful planning, and habitual labor are your tools. Strength alone is insufficient intelligence. Timing and observation are equally essential. You observe the older villagers, their movements deliberate and practiced, the product of years of enduring harsh seasons. They have internalized survival as a way of life, and you begin to understand that winter is not defeated. It is managed day by day, task by task, breath by breath. The night deepens, and the hut grows colder. You adjust blankets, ensure water is nearby, and check on animals one last time. The fire dwindles to embers. Outside, snow continues to settle silently, covering footprints and masking hazards. You lie down, stiff and sore, but alive. Survival is the quiet triumph of method over chance, endurance over discomfort, observation over recklessness. Close your eyes. Feel the frost at the windows, the warmth of the embers, the soft rhythm of your breath. The village endures. You endure. And tomorrow, the cycle begins again. Repetition, vigilance, and quiet perseverance carrying life through the harshest season of all. Morning arrives with a pale light that barely warms the village. The sun has yet to climb fully above the horizon, and frost clings stubbornly to the rooftops and paths. You awaken stiff and cold, straw prickling through layers of clothing, your breath misting in the air of the hut. Even a small movement feels like effort. Your body resists, and yet survival demands action. Your first task is tending the fire. Embers from the previous night must be coaxed back to life. A flint strikes, sparks land on dried kindling, and smoke curls hesitantly. Fire is life here, warmth, light, and a means to cook. Without it, survival is precarious. Fuel is precious, so you carefully select pieces of wood, small twigs for starting, slightly larger pieces for sustaining heat. Every matchstick, every ember is counted toward the day's endurance. Water is next. Wells may be partially frozen, and streams are often covered with a thin sheet of ice. You break the ice carefully, aware that spilling a single bucket can ruin your effort. Snow may be melted when water is scarce. but it requires fuel and patience. You watch neighbors managing similar routines, noting the precision of each action. Survival is a mosaic of repetitive, deliberate behaviors. One lapse, an overturned bucket, a frozen pipe can escalate into hardship. Breakfast is again simple. Porridge, perhaps sweetened with a little honey or flavored with grains stored from summer. Bread, if available, is dense and tough, baked weeks before and preserved as best as possible. Every bite is measured, not only for sustenance but for conservation. Hunger is constant in winter, calories are not abundant, and each meal is part of a strategy for endurance. You layer clothing carefully. Wool, linen, and patched fabrics are your armor against the cold. Every fold and seam matters. Exposure to frost, especially during labor, risks frostbite or illness. Gloves are essential, but often improvised. Boots are thick and sometimes uneven, designed for function over comfort. You notice that even minor lapses, an unfastened cloak, a thin sock, can turn the day into a struggle. Once basic needs are met, work begins in earnest. Livestock must be tended, cows fed and sheltered, goats milked, chickens protected from wind and snow. You inspect hooves for frostbite, fur for dampness, and provide bedding from straw and rags. Animals are a lifeline. Their well-being directly impacts the family's survival. Even a small death, a goat lost to exposure, a cow injured, is a setback that echoes throughout the season. Chores extend to the village infrastructure. Wooden paths, fences, and roofs are repaired with urgency. Snow removal is a constant task, though limited tools make it slow. Each repair prevents injury or loss of property, reinforcing the idea that winter survival is proactive rather than reactive. Small tasks repeated daily accumulate into a functioning, enduring system. Children participate early and often. They fetch water, chop kindling, and carry supplies from one household to another. Their lessons are practical, learned through repetition and observation. Mistakes are instructive. Slipping on ice, dropping a bucket, or mishandling fire is corrected quickly. Adaptation is taught through experience rather than instruction. Those who cannot learn through practice are at greater risk during harsh winters. Community is crucial. Villagers share labor, resources, and knowledge. Wood is divided, and measured water sources are managed collectively. Food stores may be pooled or traded. Cooperation is not sentimental, it is strategic. Collective effort ensures survival for individuals who would struggle alone. The elderly receive assistance with heavy labor. The sick are tended to the extent possible, and small children are protected by group vigilance. Without cooperation, life would be far more precarious. By mid-morning, the routine of winter is well established. You chop wood with precise rhythm, minimizing wasted effort while maximizing fuel production. You haul water along icy paths, careful to prevent spilling. You inspect animals and repair structures, all the while conserving energy. The rhythm of work is repetitive, almost hypnotic, yet every motion matters. Small errors accumulate, careful attention preserves life. Hunger persists, but you manage it strategically. Porridge, bread, or a spoonful of preserved grains are rationed to maintain energy. Even during brief rests, you remain alert, listening for sounds of animals in distress, the creak of a weak roof, or signs of frost damage to stored food. Every detail is relevant. Survival depends on awareness, not strength alone. Social structures in winter are subtle but essential. The village observes unspoken hierarchies based on skill, endurance, and knowledge of survival techniques. Those who tend animals effectively, repair structures reliably, and manage resources prudently are respected. Experience is visible in movements and decisions. Authority is earned through competence rather than inheritance or wealth. Observation of these hierarchies is critical for learning and integrating into the survival network. Disputes are minimal but carry consequences. Winter is unforgiving, and conflict can jeopardize more than comfort. Arguments over shared resources, land, or tools are resolved quickly, often through negotiation or practical enforcement. The threat of scarcity tempers behavior. Cooperation is necessary, though grudges are quietly remembered. Survival requires both vigilance and diplomacy, balancing self-interest with the needs of the community. Afternoon brings its own hazards. Snow-covered paths hide ice and uneven ground. Wood piles can collapse, roofs may sag under weight, and poorly tended animals risk injury or escape. Attention to detail is constant. You notice subtle strategies employed by experienced villagers, layered clothing to conserve heat, keeping small fires near work areas, rotating tasks to prevent exhaustion, and careful pacing of energy. These practices accumulate into a system of endurance that increases the likelihood of survival. Children continue their duties, sometimes playfully, sometimes seriously. They observe adult techniques, absorbing lessons through imitation. Mistakes are corrected through immediate feedback, ensuring that the next attempt is safer or more efficient. Learning is not abstract, it is survival in practice. By evening, work slows. Animals are secured, fires stoked, paths cleared, and tools stored. The day's labor is complete, but fatigue presses heavily. Every joint aches, every muscle is stiff, and the skin is cold despite layers of clothing. Hunger is persistent. Even a brief lapse in attention could undo hours of careful effort. Dinner is modest: porridge, perhaps bread, a small portion of preserved meat if available. Conversation is practical, focusing on chores for the next day, weather forecasts, and condition of animals or crops. Even humor is muted, energy is conserved for necessity. Nightfall is both a relief and a challenge, as darkness and cold heighten risks. Preparation for night is meticulous. Extra straw is added to bedding. Firewood is stacked for maximum duration. Water is stored to prevent freezing, and clothing is layered to maintain warmth. Even minor oversights, a drafty wall, an uncovered window, damp bedding, can result in discomfort or illness. Vigilance continues even as the day ends. Survival is cumulative. Attention now affects the ability to endure the coming hours. You observe older villagers, moving deliberately, almost instinctively, attending to small tasks with precision. Their movements are economical, their attention constant. Years of enduring winter have ingrained a rhythm of labor, awareness, and foresight. You recognize that survival is not a matter of strength or courage alone, but of habit, observation, and careful planning. Night falls fully, and the hut grows colder. You adjust blankets, ensure water is within reach, and check on animals one last time. The fire dwindles, but embers remain enough to reignite in the morning. Outside, snow continues to settle silently, erasing footprints and masking hazards. The village sleeps lightly, alert to signs of frost damage, collapsing roofs, or injured livestock. You lie down on straw, stiff and sore, feeling the cumulative weight of labor, vigilance, and cold. Sleep is light, punctuated by dreams of frost, snow, and the quiet rhythm of survival. The day's lessons linger: repetition, careful attention, cooperation, and strategic energy use are not abstract concepts, but the tools that preserve life. Tomorrow, you will rise to the same cold, the same frost, the same unyielding demands of winter. Every action, however small, will matter. Mistakes will carry consequence. Success is measured not in comfort or leisure, but in continued life, warmth, and sustenance. Endurance is cumulative, built day by day, action by action. Close your eyes. Feel the frost against the walls, the warmth of embers, the quiet breathing of livestock. The village endures. You endure. And as night deepens, the rhythm of winter continues, unrelenting, exacting, and survived only by those who respect its demands. Night settles over the village like a thick, dark blanket. Snow crunches softly against the roofs of huts, and the wind carries a faint, biting chill through narrow gaps in walls and doors. The village is silent except for the occasional lowing of cattle, the creak of frozen wood, or the scratching of mice in the stored grains. You lie on your straw bedding, stiff and sore, the remnants of firelight casting flickering shadows across the hut. Even in stillness, survival demands attention. You check the fire one last time, ensuring embers remain for rekindling in the morning. Water, though frozen outside, is accessible nearby. Clothing is layered carefully to preserve warmth. Animals have been fed and sheltered, their breathing quiet and steady. Every detail is accounted for, because in winter, neglect can be fatal. The night is long, and a single lapse, an unmonitored draft, an uncovered animal, or a frozen water source can compromise life. Mistakes are never minor here. A misjudged path, a poorly maintained fence, or an unattended animal can escalate into hardship or death. You reflect on the day's efforts, the hauling of water, the chopping of wood, the tending of livestock, the repair of structures, and the strategic rationing of food. Each action is small, repetitive, and seemingly mundane, yet each is critical. Survival in winter is not a heroic spectacle. It is the accumulation of tiny, deliberate, careful decisions. You observe neighbors moving about in similar routines, their labor synchronized through necessity. The village's endurance depends on the quiet diligence of each member. The elderly, weak, or ill are supported, not through sentiment, but through the practical understanding that the group's collective survival is inseparable from individual contributions. Cooperation is survival, and even minor lapses by one person ripple through the entire community. Children, surprisingly resilient, contribute meaningfully. They deliver water, collect firewood, tend small animals, and observe adult techniques. Their lessons are experiential. They learn the consequences of missteps early and adapt quickly. You notice how swiftly they internalize the patterns of survival, how to balance fuel, avoid slipping on ice, manage cold fingers, or care for a distressed animal. Winter teaches them discipline, observation, and endurance, skills they will carry into adulthood. Even play is purposeful. A child sliding across ice or moving snow blocks learns balance, judgment, and risk management. Mistakes are corrected swiftly and sometimes harshly. A fall, a scrape, a dropped bucket is a lesson in both caution and consequence. In this environment, every action is a potential survival skill, and every misstep is a learning opportunity. By morning, the day begins again in the same cold, pale light. The sun rises briefly, barely warming the village, and you awake with stiff limbs and a numbed body. Yet there is comfort in routine. You know the sequence of labor, the rhythm of chores, and the demands of each task. Experience teaches efficiency, patience, and foresight. Even minor adjustments, a slightly better stacking of wood, a more careful inspection of animals, a thicker layer of clothing, yield cumulative benefits over the season. Winter is unrelenting, but you are learning to endure. Each day survived builds resilience. Each mistake corrected preserves future survival. Each repetition strengthens habits that become instinctual, reducing risk and conserving energy. You notice the rhythm in labor and life: chop wood, fetch water, tend animals, repair structures, cook, eat, repeat. This monotony is the essence of survival: predictable, repetitive, yet essential. Food remains sparse, but the strategies of rationing sustain you. Small portions eaten at regular intervals maintain energy. Preserved grains, salted meat, and stored vegetables provide minimal calories, but are allocated carefully. Even hunger becomes a managed variable, tolerated, anticipated, and mitigated through discipline. Excessive indulgence is dangerous, as resources are finite and winter is long. You feel the subtle triumph of restraint and foresight. Labor is equally strategic. Wood is stacked to minimize heat loss. Fires are stoked to conserve fuel, while maximizing warmth. Chores are sequenced to optimize energy expenditure. Even minor errors, such as lifting a too heavy log at the wrong time or neglecting to insulate a door, are noted and corrected in future efforts. Experience is cumulative, subtle, and critical for survival. The social order of the village persists quietly. Respect and hierarchy are earned through competence, reliability, and endurance. Experienced villagers guide younger or less capable neighbors, subtly enforcing routines without ceremony or authority. Cooperation ensures that each household can survive, even when the environment is indifferent. The strength of the community is inseparable from the discipline of individuals. Disputes are rare in winter. Scarcity and cold demand pragmatism. Conflicts over food, water, or resources are resolved quickly and discreetly. Lessons are absorbed silently. Cooperation outweighs personal pride. Vigilance is necessary, and mistakes carry tangible consequences. Survival enforces humility and observation. Evenings are measured against darkness and cold. The hearth becomes the focal point, sustaining warmth and light. You eat a modest meal, check on animals, and perform final chores before retreating to straw bedding. Conversation is minimal and practical, focusing on tomorrow's needs, the condition of resources, and the ongoing care of livestock. Reflection, when it occurs, is quiet and contemplative. You consider small successes: a bucket of water transported without spilling, animals secured, fire maintained. Survival is cumulative. Small victories matter as much as life itself. Sleep arrives lightly, punctuated by wind whistling through gaps, the shifting of animals, or snow settling heavily on rooftops. You rest, aware that tomorrow will demand the same vigilance, the same careful attention, the same labor repeated. Dreams are muted by fatigue and necessity. Winter has taught you endurance, observation, and the quiet rhythm of life. You recognize that survival is not heroic. It is not grand or celebrated. It is routine, repetitive, and painstaking. Yet in this quiet, monotonous effort, life persists. Houses stand, animals live, food is rationed, and the village endures. Humans survive not through courage alone, but through repetition, observation, and careful attention. Even small, unremarkable acts, stacking wood, carrying water, patching a roof, accumulate to preserve life through a harsh season. The older villagers embody this knowledge. Every movement is practiced, deliberate, and efficient. Experience is visible in posture, in the sequence of actions, in decisions about rationing and labor. Survival is methodical, disciplined, and largely invisible. Theirs is a quiet triumph, life preserved day by day, hour by hour, breath by breath. By dawn, the cycle repeats. You awaken, frost on the windows, snow underfoot, and the village begins again. Every action, from feeding animals to maintaining fires to rationing food, is purposeful. Every movement matters. Even small misjudgments could cascade into hardship or illness. You feel a sense of rhythm in labor, a continuity in vigilance, and a strange comfort in the repetition of survival. Winter is relentless, but so too is human endurance. You understand the lesson of the season. Life persists not through heroism or fortune alone, but through quiet diligence, careful planning, and collective effort. Each day, survived builds skills, habits, and resilience. Each small victory, an unspoiled loaf, a warm animal, a safely stacked woodpile, is a testament to human persistence. You close your eyes, letting the frost, the cold, and the wind fade in your mind. The village endures, you endure, and as sleep settles, you carry forward the quiet wisdom of survival, repetition, awareness, cooperation, and endurance. Life persists in small acts, unnoticed yet essential, and through these acts, humanity continues quietly, even in the harshest winters. Close your eyes. Let the wind howl softly outside. Let the snow settle. Let the embers fade. And rest. Congratulations! You just woke up in a medieval village during the 14th century, a time when famine, plague, and oppressive social structures defined daily existence. The first thing you notice is the weight of vulnerability. Your bed, a simple straw mattress in a wooden or wattle and daub hut, is hard and thin. Your body aches from sleeping on the uneven floor, and the air is heavy with the mingling smells of smoke, damp straw, and unwashed bodies. Outside, the morning light is pale and hesitant, filtered through soot-darkened windows. The village is quiet but tense. Smoke rises from chimneys, carrying the scent of burning wood and dried dung. Animals stir in their pens. Cows low, chickens cluck, pigs snuffle. Even these small sounds are reminders that life must be maintained constantly, or it could be lost. Livestock are essential, but vulnerable. They require feeding, protection, and observation, and each animal lost represents a setback that might be irrecoverable in times of famine. You rise, stiff from sleep, and wrap yourself in layered clothing. Wool, linen, and patched fabrics protect against chill, but they do little against the pervasive damp. Even minor exposure to the elements can weaken your body, leaving you susceptible to illness. You feel your stomach rumble. Last night's thin meal of bread and porridge was barely enough. Hunger is constant, often gnawing beneath the surface of every activity. Water must be drawn next. Wells may be shallow, poorly maintained, or contaminated. Streams are cold, muddy, and infested with microscopic hazards that cannot be seen. You lift the bucket carefully, aware that spillage or freezing could limit access later in the day. Every drop counts. Water sustains life, but in scarcity, it becomes a calculated resource. You pause to glance at your neighbors. Each carries out the same careful routines, their faces lined with fatigue and worry. Breakfast is meager, calculated for survival rather than satisfaction. Porridge, sometimes flavored with scant grains, provides minimal energy. Bread is hard and dense, often baked weeks prior, stored to last through the uncertainty of the season. Occasionally, preserved meat or dried legumes are available, but these luxuries are rare and rationed carefully. Each bite is intentional, part of a broader strategy to conserve energy and sustain life. Hunger is persistent, but planning and rationing allow you to endure. The village itself is quiet yet active, a delicate choreography of survival. Children fetch water, tend animals, and observe the routines of adults. Elders move carefully, their bodies adapted to years of hardship and experience. Each person fulfills a role, no matter how small, and the collective labor ensures that survival is possible. You notice how every small action, a bundle of firewood stacked correctly, a trough refilled precisely, a roof patched securely, contributes to the delicate balance of life. Outside, the land appears deceptively still. Fields lie fallow or are partially cultivated, soil exhausted by previous years' labor. Crops are scarce, damaged by weather, pests, or neglect during previous famines. Livestock are few and often weak, reflecting the scarcity of feed and the ongoing struggle to maintain sustenance. Even the simple act of moving through the village is cautious. Mud, uneven paths, and frozen patches make every step a potential hazard. You notice a neighbor tending a small garden plot, carefully scraping away frost, trying to coax life from the soil. You realize how critical such micro-efforts are. A handful of vegetables may determine whether a family survives the week. Every action in this environment carries weight, whether tending animals, mending a roof, or preparing a small meal. Life is a constant negotiation with scarcity, risk, and vulnerability. Plague is another invisible factor in daily life. Even if the village has not yet been touched, rumor carries fear. The Black Death has swept across regions, and knowledge of its devastation is widespread. The sick are isolated when possible, but resources for treatment are minimal, and understanding of disease is rudimentary. Preventive measures are limited to cleanliness, avoidance of the visibly ill, and superstition. The ever-present possibility of illness adds psychological weight to the physical demands of life. Famine compounds vulnerability. Scarce harvests, poor storage, and unpredictable weather mean that meals are often thin, irregular, or entirely absent. You notice the careful rationing in households. Bread is broken into portions for each member. Water is distributed sparingly, and scraps are conserved for future meals. Survival depends not only on strength, but on judgment, patience, and meticulous planning. Every action affects the day-to-day probability of life. The social structure, the lords, tax collectors, and clergy, adds another layer of pressure. Obligations to the lord are non-negotiable. Rent, labor, or tithe must be delivered, regardless of personal scarcity. Failure is not tolerated. Punishment may be harsh, immediate, and final. You see neighbors leaving early in the morning to work in the Lord's fields, hands raw from cold and labor, backs bent under the weight of both physical work and social expectation. Endurance here is as much a product of external pressure as of natural hazard. Even casual movement through the village requires awareness of social hierarchy. Requests for assistance, negotiation for resources, and informal interactions are governed by unspoken rules. Missteps, a poorly chosen word, a delayed action, an inadvertent disrespect could have consequences far beyond social embarrassment. Survival is practical, precise, and highly attentive to the nuances of community, labor, and obligation. By midday, physical exhaustion is apparent. Tasks accumulate. Tending animals, repairing fences, fetching water, preparing food, and observing the health of family members. Hunger persists despite small meals, and the cold exacerbates fatigue. Every movement requires energy and careful judgment. Even minor mistakes, dropping a bucket, misplacing firewood, missing a step, have amplified consequences under these conditions. Your body has adapted to constant vigilance. Eyes are quick to notice subtle changes, a cow limping, a patch of thin ice, a sudden change in weather. Hands are roughened, calloused, and sensitive to the textures of survival. Straw, rope, wood, and animal fur. Muscles, though lean, are trained for endurance, repetition, and heavy labor. Your mind remains alert, constantly assessing risk, coordinating tasks, and anticipating scarcity. Survival is a full-time occupation. the psychological weight of uncertainty is equally heavy. Plague may strike tomorrow, famine may worsen, the Lord may demand labor or resources, already stretched thin. Even minor illness or injury is a potential catastrophe. You notice the subtle ways villagers manage this weight. They adhere strictly to routine, rely on familiar patterns, and avoid unnecessary risk. Familiarity and repetition provide a measure of control over a world that is otherwise unpredictable. Children, like adults, absorb lessons early. They learn to move carefully, speak cautiously, and observe everything with attention. Mistakes carry consequences for both themselves and their families. Play is brief, interspersed with work and observation. Skills are learned not through instruction, but through experience, fetching water, carrying firewood, tending animals, and watching adults manage risk. By late afternoon, the village functions on collective coordination. Communal labor continues in subtle ways. A neighbor assists with a roof repair, another shares firewood, children distribute water among households. Cooperation is practical, driven by necessity, and reinforced by repetition. Every small act is critical for survival. A shared effort may prevent frostbite, starvation, or illness. Even minor failures ripple outward, demonstrating the delicate balance of endurance. Evening brings preparation for night. Firewood is stacked, water stored, animals sheltered, and food apportioned carefully. Every precaution matters. A mismanaged fire could leave you cold, insufficient water may compromise hygiene or consumption, and unprotected animals could be lost to predators or exposure. Vigilance is continuous. Survival is a sequence of small, deliberate acts that accumulate into a functioning day and ultimately into life itself. As night deepens, the village becomes still. Fires burn low, animals settle, and the wind moves across frozen fields. You lie on straw bedding, tired yet alert. The day has been survived, but survival is fragile. A single error, illness, or scarcity could change the outcome. You reflect on the subtle lessons learned. Awareness, repetition, endurance, and cooperation are essential. Strength alone is insufficient. Judgment and attention are equally critical. Sleep comes lightly, punctuated by the distant lowing of cattle, the murmur of wind through gaps, and the occasional cough from a neighbor. Dreams are thin, reflecting hunger, cold, and labor rather than fantasy. Even rest is measured, with the body partially alert to environmental hazards and social responsibilities. You understand that survival in this environment is cumulative, habitual, and disciplined. Each small action, feeding animals, carrying water, repairing structures, rationing food, accumulates into the quiet triumph of endurance. Life persists not through heroism or fortune, but through method, awareness, and the careful coordination of labor and social interaction. Tomorrow will bring the same challenges: hunger, labor, exposure, social obligations, and the ever-present threat of disease. Every movement, choice, and action will matter. You feel a cautious confidence. Through vigilance, careful planning, and disciplined action, life is preserved, even in the face of relentless adversity. Close your eyes. Feel the straw beneath you, the embers of the fire fading, the wind whispering through the village. The village endures. You endure. And as night deepens, you carry forward the quiet wisdom of survival. Repetition, observation, cooperation, and endurance are the invisible structures that sustain life, even in the harshest of times. Morning arrives, grey and muted, over the medieval village. Frost glazes the roofs and fields, though the chill is less sharp than in the depths of winter, hinting at the slow advance of spring. Yet the air carries an invisible weight, the potential for hunger, disease, and enforced labor that defines daily life. You rise from your straw bed, bones stiff, muscles sore, and stomach empty. Hunger is persistent, gnawing beneath the surface even after a thin breakfast of bread and porridge. Water must be drawn immediately. Wells are shallow, often contaminated, and streams can carry unseen dangers. You carefully lift a bucket, aware that spilling or freezing this limited resource could compromise the day's efforts. Every drop counts, not only for drinking but for cooking, washing, and tending animals. Your neighbors follow similar routines, their faces lined with fatigue, their movements deliberate. The village's survival is a coordinated sequence of labor, awareness, and endurance. The tasks before you are numerous and unyielding. Livestock must be tended, cows milked, pigs fed, chickens secured. Animals are both sustenance and labor, and their care requires vigilance. Frosted hooves, sparse feed, or illness can have cascading consequences, endangering food supplies and labor potential. You note the subtle strategies employed by experienced villagers, stacking hay carefully, feeding animals in rotation, and observing for signs of weakness or disease. Meanwhile, the fields must be prepared for planting. Soil is heavy and often damaged from previous poor harvests. Labor is tedious and repetitive, clearing debris, tending fences, and breaking clumps of frozen earth. The villagers coordinate their work to maximize efficiency while conserving energy. Every task, no matter how small, contributes to survival. Fatigue is constant, but precision and patience prevent disaster. Famine shapes every action. Scarce harvests from prior seasons have left limited stores of grain. Bread and porridge are rationed meticulously, and even scraps are conserved. Every meal is calculated to sustain energy without exhausting reserves. Hunger is a silent companion, influencing movement, attention, and judgment. You notice neighbors carefully slicing bread into equal portions, measuring porridge, and stretching the smallest amounts to feed the most mouths. The discipline of rationing is as vital as labor itself. Even children are subject to these pressures. They fetch water, carry firewood, and tend animals. Their play is interspersed with labor, and mistakes are costly. A dropped bucket, broken tool, or neglected animal is quickly corrected. Lessons are learned through observation and repetition rather than instruction. Each child internalizes the rhythms of work, hunger, and survival, shaping behaviors that will endure into adulthood. Disease, particularly plague, lingers as an invisible and unpredictable threat. Even if your village has not yet been struck, news of epidemics in nearby towns shapes behavior. Villagers maintain basic hygiene where possible, burning refuse, cleaning animal pens, and avoiding contact with visibly ill neighbors. Superstition and religious belief guide some precautions, but knowledge is limited. A single cough or fever could signify disaster, and vigilance is constant. Awareness and observation are essential. Mistakes could result in death. You notice the older villagers moving with practiced care, assessing symptoms, isolating the weak, and observing changes in behavior or appearance. Their experience with prior outbreaks guides decisions about movement, interaction, and care. Children and younger adults imitate these patterns, slowly learning to navigate both the physical and social hazards of disease. The village adapts collectively, even without understanding the precise mechanisms of infection. Lordly demands further complicate survival. Rent, tithes, and mandatory labor remain non-negotiable. Even during famine or disease, obligations must be fulfilled. Failure brings punishment, which can range from fines to corporal retribution. You see villagers rising before dawn to travel to the Lord's lands, performing physically demanding labor with minimal sustenance. Every task consumes energy that is already scarce. The compounding of labor, hunger, and exposure requires endurance beyond simple physical capacity. It demands strategy, pacing, and acute awareness. You said. Social vigilance is also crucial. Observation of neighbors, the allocation of tasks, and adherence to unspoken rules of conduct ensure that obligations are met without overstepping boundaries. Even minor errors, a forgotten chore, delayed payment, or miscommunication, can have consequences for both the individual and family. Survival depends not only on physical endurance, but also on social acumen, subtle negotiation, and careful observation. By midday, exhaustion is evident. Repeated tasks, scarce food, and exposure to cold sap strength. Yet labor cannot cease. Animals must be fed, fields maintained, and preparations made for unexpected hardship. Every movement carries the weight of potential consequence. Experienced villagers conserve energy strategically, rotating tasks, performing repetitive labor efficiently, and anticipating hazards. Those less practiced risk overexertion, injury, or mistakes that threaten survival. Even minor miscalculations carry compounded consequences. A dropped bundle of wood may delay fire preparation. A neglected animal may lose health. A misjudged ration may increase hunger for the evening. Awareness and repetition are the foundations of survival, transforming mundane labor into a finely tuned system capable of withstanding persistent pressure. Children remain observers and participants. They mimic adult labor, internalize routines, and develop habits essential for endurance. Mistakes are instructive. A cracked pot, a spilled bucket, or a misfed animal teaches caution, skill, and resilience. The village is simultaneously a school, a labor camp, and a support system. Every action carries lessons, and every lesson strengthens the collective ability to endure famine, plague, and hierarchical demands. Community coordination is subtle but critical. Shared resources, communal labor, and information exchange allow the village to function despite scarcity and disease. Firewood is distributed, water sources monitored, and food carefully rationed. Even brief assistance, a neighbor lending a tool, sharing a portion of grain, or helping repair a fence, ensures collective endurance. Cooperation is not optional, it is practical and necessary. Afternoon brings intensified risk. Weather may worsen unexpectedly, livestock may fall ill, or labor demands may increase. Mistakes made earlier in the day, minor though they may seem, now carry amplified consequences. You note the careful sequencing of tasks. Water is carried in small, manageable loads. Fires are stoked methodically. Food portions are measured precisely. Animals are checked repeatedly for signs of weakness. These repetitive practices accumulate into resilience, allowing the village to continue despite constant pressures. Hunger remains pervasive. You measure portions carefully, stretch small rations across multiple meals, and monitor energy expenditure closely. Fatigue is constant, and the mind grows sluggish if rest is insufficient. Even brief pauses are strategic. A chance to conserve energy, monitor surroundings, or plan the next task. Survival is a delicate balance of consumption, labor, and vigilance. Evening approaches with subdued light. The village prepares for the night. Fires are stoked, animals are secured, food is apportioned, and tools are stored. The labor of the day consolidates into preparation for the challenges of the night. Awareness remains crucial. Even brief lapses, an unmonitored fire, a forgotten ration, a neglected animal can threaten life. The village functions as a network of continuous observation, repetition, and mutual support. You notice older villagers' careful habits, checking for disease symptoms, verifying water and food stores, repairing structures, and ensuring children are adequately supervised. Their actions are practiced, precise, and habitual. They embody the accumulated knowledge of generations, guiding the village through famine, plague, and hierarchical obligations with quiet efficiency. Night settles. You lie on straw bedding, body weary from labor, mind alert to potential hazards. Sleep comes lightly, interrupted by the low murmur of neighbors, the breathing of animals, or distant coughs signaling illness. Hunger lingers, cold seeps through clothing, and vigilance persists. Yet there is a subtle triumph in enduring another day. Every repetitive task completed, every ration measured, every animal tended contributes to survival. You reflect on the compounding pressures of famine, disease, and lordly obligations. Each factor alone is challenging together. They shape life into a constant negotiation between scarcity, risk, and endurance. The village functions through habitual labor, observation, cooperation, and careful rationing, the quiet, often invisible structures that preserve life in a harsh, unforgiving world. Close your eyes, feel the straw beneath you, the lingering warmth of embers, the quiet breathing of animals. The village endures. You endure. And as sleep deepens, carry forward the understanding that survival is built through repetition, vigilance, and collective effort, even when every day brings compounded challenges. Night has deepened over the village. Outside, a cold wind rattles the roofs of huts, carrying the faint, unsettling sound of the forest and distant fields. Snow and mud alternate with patches of frozen earth, leaving paths uneven and treacherous. Inside your hut, the straw bed feels thin and unyielding beneath your weight. Your body aches from a day of repeated labor, from hauling water, tending animals, preparing food, and navigating both hunger and obligation. Yet there is a quiet satisfaction. Another day has been endured. Even in stillness, the lessons of the day are evident. Survival is cumulative. Every ration measured carefully, every task completed efficiently, every animal secured contributes to the delicate network that allows life to persist. Small errors, a dropped bundle of firewood, spilled water, neglected animal, could have cascaded into greater hardship. The repetition of labor, vigilance, and cooperation transforms the daily struggle into enduring resilience. Plague remains an invisible threat. Even when it does not strike your village directly, awareness permeates every action. Villagers maintain careful hygiene where possible, avoid unnecessary contact with the sick, and observe for early signs of illness. These routines are practiced, habitual, and silently respected. Children, too, internalize these patterns, learning through observation and repetition how to navigate an environment in which illness could quickly become fatal. Every precaution, no matter how small, is a protective measure against the unpredictable forces of disease. Famine shapes behavior and decisions, subtly but profoundly. Food scarcity dictates the rhythm of daily life. Bread is portioned, porridge measured, and scraps preserved. Labor and energy expenditure are calculated against caloric intake. Every task is influenced by the persistent presence of hunger, and every small decision, how to split a loaf, which animal to feed first, whether to venture farther for water, carries significance. Famine forces precision, discipline, and foresight. Lordly obligations impose further constraint. Rent, tithes, and forced labor continue irrespective of local conditions. Work must be performed, obligations fulfilled, and social expectations navigated carefully. Any lapse may lead to punishment, fines, public censure, or physical penalties. You notice neighbors moving to fulfill these obligations, faces lined with fatigue and resignation, hands raw from labor. Endurance here is physical, social, and psychological. Compliance is survival, defiance risks calamity. Even minor lapses, a delayed labor delivery, a mismanaged ration, a casual word, can have amplified consequences. Social awareness and adaptability are as crucial as physical strength. Villagers maintain careful observation, monitoring each other's behavior, coordinating resources, and ensuring that obligations are met. Survival depends on precision, cooperation, and constant vigilance. By midday, The consequences of prior scarcity, disease, and labor accumulate. You feel exhaustion, persistent hunger, and the weight of responsibility. Yet labor cannot cease. Animals must be fed, structures repaired, and water transported. Every movement carries significance, for even small mistakes ripple outward, affecting survival for yourself, family, and neighbors. Experienced villagers conserve energy, rotate tasks, and optimize repetitive labor. Novices or children learn through imitation, internalizing patterns essential for endurance. The compounding pressures of famine, plague, and social hierarchy shape every moment. Life is fragile, yet rhythm and routine stabilize it. Survival emerges from repetition, observation, and cooperative effort, rather than heroism or strength. Every action matters. Every small success accumulates, building resilience against the relentless demands of environment, disease, and hierarchy. Evening descends with a muted grey light. Villagers prepare for the night. Fires are stoked, water secured, animals sheltered, and food apportioned. Every precaution matters. A neglected fire can lead to freezing, an unmonitored animal risks injury or death. Misallocated rations can exacerbate hunger. Vigilance is continuous, but habit and repetition make it manageable. Experienced villagers move efficiently, attending to every detail without conscious effort. Patterns become instinctual. Survival becomes methodical. Children participate, observing and imitating adult labor while managing their own small responsibilities. They carry water, feed animals, and monitor supplies, learning endurance through practice. Mistakes teach caution, judgment, and skill. They internalize rhythms of work, rationing, and vigilance that will carry them through adulthood. Their education is practical and continuous. Every small lesson has tangible consequences for life and survival. Night settles fully. You lie on straw bedding, muscles aching, mind alert to potential threats. Hunger lingers, cold seeps through layers of clothing, and awareness remains necessary. Even in sleep, the village functions as a network. Animals breathe softly, neighbors monitor fires and water, children rest lightly, prepared to respond if necessary. Sleep is light, punctuated by sounds of life and subtle signs of environmental hazards. You reflect on the quiet structure of endurance. Survival is not achieved through luck or heroism, but through careful attention, repetition, and coordination. Daily labor, resource management, and observation collectively create resilience. Every seemingly mundane action, stacking wood, measuring porridge, repairing a fence, tending an animal, contributes to the continuity of life. These small, repetitive efforts are invisible victories, yet they preserve existence in a fragile world. The cumulative consequences of plague, famine, and lordly obligations shape generations. The village adapts, forming habits and routines that maximize survival probability. Knowledge is passed silently. Children observe elders, neighbors coordinate, and repetition instills discipline. Experience is encoded in movement, labor, and attention. Patterns become instinctual actions that ensure survival are performed automatically, even under exhaustion or duress. You notice how social cohesion supports endurance. Cooperation is not sentimental but strategic. Firewood shared, rations managed collectively, labor distributed. Even small gestures, lending a tool, assisting with a repair, offering a portion of food, strengthen the village's resilience. Collective effort amplifies individual capacity, turning small, consistent acts into the foundation for survival against the compounded pressures of famine, disease, and hierarchy. The night deepens further, firelight flickers, animals breathe quietly, and the village rests lightly, alert to environmental hazards. You lie on straw bedding, feeling the ache of muscles, the gnaw of hunger, and the vigilance that has become habitual. Despite hardship, there is continuity. Another day has been survived. Another day of labor, vigilance, and careful attention ensures that life persists. Sleep arrives, carrying the quiet triumph of endurance. Every measured ration, every repaired roof, every secured animal, every task completed methodically contributes to survival. You carry forward the cumulative lessons of repetition, observation, cooperation, and careful judgment. Life in the village endures not through grand gestures, but through invisible, persistent effort, the subtle work that maintains existence in the harshest conditions. By dawn, the cycle begins anew. You awaken, stretched, cold, and hungry, yet prepared to repeat the rhythm of survival. Every movement, decision, and task carries consequence. Even minor errors can escalate into hardship, while consistent, methodical effort accumulates into resilience. The village continues, sustained by the invisible structures of labor, observation, and cooperation. Survival persists, quietly, day by day. You close your eyes and feel the straw beneath you, the faint warmth of embers fading, the quiet breathing of animals. The village endures. You endure. And as sleep deepens, you carry forward the wisdom of survival. Vigilance, repetition, foresight, and collective effort are the invisible foundations that sustain life, even in a world shaped by plague, famine, and hierarchical obligation. Close your eyes, let the wind settle, let the embers fade, let the quiet persistence of life carry you into rest. Congratulations! You just woke up in Victorian London, sometime in the mid-19th century. The streets outside are foggy, layered with soot and smoke, carrying the faint tang of coal, horse manure, and damp stone. You stir on a straw mattress in a cramped, poorly ventilated room, the walls streaked with grime, the air heavy and acrid. The sunlight filtering through the window is dim, muted by layers of urban pollution and fog. Even before rising, you feel the weight of the day. Hunger may tug at your stomach, breakfast is minimal or non-existent. Perhaps a slice of dry bread, sometimes a thin gruel if fortunate. You understand that energy is a scarce commodity, to be preserved for the labor ahead. Clothing is thin and worn, often hand-me-downs, patched repeatedly. You pull on layers, rough against the skin, preparing for a day that will test endurance more than skill. The world outside is alive with the rhythm of Victorian London, carts rumbling over cobblestones, distant voices shouting, horses stamping, chimneys belching smoke into the grey sky. But your attention is drawn to the task ahead. Today, like every day, is devoted to climbing chimneys, narrow, soot-streaked flues that carry smoke from fireplaces into the sky. For many children, some as young as 5 or 6, this is work, not play. You rise carefully from your bedding, aware that even minor slips or trips can bruise your body before the work begins. The narrow stairs creak underfoot as you descend to the street, where you join other children bound for the houses of wealthier Londoners. The contrast is immediate: grand facades, polished windows, and fireplaces roaring inside, while outside you are clothed in rags, carrying a broom, brush, or simple rope harness. The disparity between laborer and client is stark, and the social rules are rigid. Submission and obedience are expected. Discussion or complaint is impossible. The morning begins with preparation. Tools are checked: soot brushes, scrapers, ropes, and sometimes a flat board or leather pad to sit or press against in tight flues. The brushes are coarse, meant to dislodge years of accumulated soot. Ropes must be inspected for frays. A snapped rope can be fatal when climbing vertical shafts. The knowledge that injury or death is a constant possibility weighs on every movement. You observe older children demonstrating techniques: how to wedge the body, how to balance on narrow bricks, how to avoid inhaling too deeply when soot clouds the air. Breakfast is consumed if there is time, often hurriedly. Sometimes it is skipped altogether because the journey to clients' houses begins early. Hunger is a constant companion, but it must be ignored. Energy is preserved not by indulgence, but by careful pacing and repetitive action. Every movement is calibrated to conserve strength while maintaining efficiency in the climb. You are aware of the social network among chimney sweeps. Older children instruct younger ones, and hierarchy is determined by experience, skill, and endurance rather than age alone. Mistakes are corrected immediately, sometimes with pain, sometimes with humiliation. Survival depends on learning quickly and obeying precisely. Errors in technique can result in getting stuck, bruised, or even suffocated. The stakes are constant, silent, and unrelenting. Walking the streets, the air is thick with coal smoke and industrial fumes. You pull your scarf over your mouth, but it barely mitigates inhalation of soot. Every breath carries fine black particles that cling to skin, hair, and lungs. Children cough quietly, used to the acrid taste and the burn of soot. Older sweeps cough more heavily, their lungs permanently scarred by years of exposure. Sickness is a slow, inevitable companion for those who survive childhood in this labor-intensive environment. Arrival at the first client house is a mix of anticipation and dread. You climb the narrow exterior staircases to reach the roof. Tiles are slick with rain, moss, and grime. The height is dizzying, but the job cannot be postponed. One misstep could end your day or your life. Chimneys vary in size, angle, and cleanliness. Some are so narrow that only the smallest children can fit, leading to recruitment of 5- or 6-year-olds for the most dangerous tasks. You observe the brick walls pressing close, soot coating every surface, and the weight of equipment in your hands. Inside the flue, space is near non-existent. Your body is contorted, squeezed into a vertical tube, scraping brick and mortar. Dust and soot swirl, filling your nose and mouth. You press the broom against the wall, moving with deliberate, repetitive motions to dislodge debris. Movement is slow and methodical, but efficiency is demanded. The brush must reach every corner. One missed patch of soot might bring complaint from the client, and penalties are administered quickly by overseers. There is no margin for error. The monotony of labor is relentless, yet each sweep carries high stakes. Breathing is difficult, lungs tighten with each inhale of fine black powder. Fingers and hands are raw from repeated scraping. Back muscles ache, and every joint feels strained. Even the most practiced children develop muscle memory, learning to wedge, shift, and push in ways that minimize energy expenditure. Habits become lifelines. Precision and repetition, rather than speed or strength, determine the likelihood of survival and continued employment. Between chimney climbs, brief moments of rest are rare. You sit on narrow ledges, hunched over, consuming whatever small snack you brought or were given. Hunger remains, but energy must be preserved for the next climb. You notice other children doing the same, silently acknowledging shared discomfort. Conversation is minimal, attention is focused entirely on the task. Safety, efficiency, and endurance dominate thought, replacing play or imagination. Observation is critical. You watch the experienced sweeps, noting how they navigate tight bends, adjust body weight, and use minimal movements to clear soot efficiently. The smallest error, a miscalculated push, a shift in weight, or a slip of the brush, could result in injury or entrapment. Even a minor delay reduces time available for other chimneys, potentially impacting earnings and survival. Apprenticeship is intense and unforgiving, emphasizing skill, attention, and endurance. Children develop subtle strategies for survival. Wrists are rotated to avoid fatigued legs, and backs are shifted to leverage narrow spaces. Breath is timed to minimize inhalation of dust. Every movement is measured, deliberate, and repeated hundreds of times daily. Even the simplest tasks, such as lifting a broom or adjusting a rope, are performed with attention to conserving energy and avoiding injury. Efficiency is learned over time, but the cost of mistakes is immediate and often harsh. By late afternoon, exhaustion is evident. Hands are black with soot, lungs burn, and muscles tremble from continuous strain. Hunger persists, sometimes barely mitigated by a dry piece of bread. You reflect on the monotony of labor. Climb, brush, descend, move to the next chimney, repeat. Yet in repetition lies survival. Each successful sweep ensures continued employment, payment often minimal, and the continuation of life under difficult circumstances. Despite the hardship, social bonds emerge. Older children mentor younger ones, neighbors exchange brief advice, and a silent camaraderie develops among those enduring the same conditions. Even small gestures, sharing a scrap of food, offering a tip about a difficult flu, or helping steady a ladder, are practical means of sustaining life and endurance. Cooperation is functional rather than sentimental. Evening approaches. Chimneys have been cleaned, equipment packed, and children return to cramped homes, faces streaked with soot, lungs aching, and bodies sore. Dinner, if available, is modest. Thin pottage, bread, or leftovers stretch to feed multiple mouths. Hunger lingers, fatigue presses heavily on every joint. Sleep will be shallow, punctuated by the aches of the day and the anticipation of tomorrow's labor. You reflect on the hazards faced: soot inhalation, cramped flues, broken bones, falls from roofs, and the constant threat of disease. Even surviving childhood in this environment is remarkable, requiring endurance, adaptability, and acute attention to physical and social hazards. Yet triumph is quiet, invisible, and largely uncelebrated. Survival is measured not in accolades, but in continued breath, functional limbs, and the ability to repeat the next day. Night falls. You lie on the straw bed, body stiff and lungs tight, the smell of soot lingering in hair, clothing, and skin. Sleep beckons, but awareness remains. Ropes must be secured, tools inspected, and preparation made for the next climb. Even rest carries responsibility. Vigilance has become instinctive habits developed under pressure, now sustain life. Tomorrow will demand the same labor, climbing narrow chimneys, scraping soot, enduring fatigue, and managing hunger. Success depends not on courage, but on repetition, attention, and the careful application of learned technique. You have survived today, but survival is cumulative. Each day's endurance builds the habits and resilience needed for the next. Close your eyes, feel the soot on your skin, the ache in your muscles, the cool air seeping through cracks. The work endures, you endure, and as sleep settles, you carry forward the quiet knowledge of survival. Repetition, observation, and attention to detail are the invisible tools that sustain life in a world of soot, smoke, and confined flues. Morning comes again, grey and damp, with fog curling low over the rooftops of Victorian London. You awaken on the straw bedding, stiff and sore, muscles still tense from yesterday's climbs. Your hands are black with soot, lungs scratchy, and eyes watery from repeated exposure to smoke and dust. Hunger is already pressing, though breakfast is meager. A small slice of bread, a thin porridge, or sometimes nothing at all. Energy is precious, and every movement must be measured to preserve it. Outside, the city is alive with activity. Horses clatter over cobblestones, carts rumble past, and distant bells mark time, though you barely hear them over the clamor of human and animal labor. The streets carry the smell of coal smoke, industrial fumes, and the damp decay of alleyways. You wrap a scarf over your mouth and nose, but the soot is inescapable. Each breath deposits a thin layer in your lungs, thickening over days, months, and years. Even now, the long-term consequences of inhalation feel distant, yet inevitable. Preparation for the day begins immediately. Tools are inspected: brushes, scrapers, ropes, and leather pads. Any fray or crack is a potential hazard. A snapped rope or broken broom could result in injury or death. You check your harness carefully and adjust clothing to protect exposed skin from sharp brick edges. Older children guide younger ones through the routine, demonstrating subtle shifts in posture and movement that reduce fatigue and risk. Every tip, gesture, and correction has practical value, honed through experience. The rhythm of labor is relentless. First chimney, second chimney, third chimney. The repetition is physical and mental. Hands ache from scraping, fingers blistered, backs stiff, shoulders tense. Every climb requires balance, coordination, and careful breathing to avoid inhaling soot. Efficiency is crucial. A delayed sweep risks reprimand, withheld payment, or additional labor. Your movements become habitual, almost instinctive, as the body adapts to repeated strain. Children, the smallest among the sweeps, often face the harshest conditions. Narrow flues demand tiny bodies, contorted and pressed against walls slick with soot and grime. The space is suffocating, the air acrid, and every movement deliberate. You learn to wedge your body, shift weight gradually, and pace breathing to survive the climb. Even the slightest misjudgment, a sudden twist, a missed foothold, a delayed exhale, could result in scrapes, bruises, or becoming stuck. Mistakes carry immediate consequences, often physical and occasionally permanent. The monotony of work is punctuated only by the rhythm of breath and the subtle sensations of muscle fatigue. Yet within this repetition lies survival. Each learned technique, each careful movement, and each small adjustment builds endurance. The invisible skill acquired through repetition allows the child's sweep to function in a world that is unforgiving, unsafe, and entirely indifferent to age or fragility. The social structure among sweeps is hierarchical and pragmatic. Older children supervise younger ones, issuing instructions and corrections with efficiency and precision. Mistakes are not excused but corrected, sometimes through discomfort or discipline. Success and survival depend on skill and obedience, not sentiment. You notice how quickly younger sweeps absorb instructions, learning to anticipate danger, regulate breathing, and optimize movements. Habits develop into instinct, allowing labor to be performed with minimal conscious thought. Between chimneys, brief rest periods offer slight relief. You may sit on narrow ledges, wipe soot from hands, or swallow a small portion of bread. Hunger persists, but the day demands that energy be preserved, not indulged. Eyes scan for danger, feet tread carefully, and hands are constantly ready to stabilize or adjust. Observation becomes second nature, noticing a slick tile, a loose brick, a frayed rope. Survival depends on constant attention to subtle cues. As the day progresses, fatigue accumulates, lungs tighten from soot, muscles tremble, and skin feels raw. Repetition continues. Climb, scrape, descend, move to the next chimney, repeat. Even minor successes, clearing a difficult flue, avoiding injury, completing a task efficiently, are quietly significant. Payment is often minimal, but the continuation of life depends on earning it. Survival is measured not by recognition, but by the ability to repeat labor successfully, day after day. Cooperation among sweeps is pragmatic. Older children mentor younger ones, share practical advice, or assist in difficult maneuvers. Small gestures, steadying a ladder, handing a tool, or offering guidance, sustain life and efficiency. Social bonds exist quietly, invisible to outsiders, but are essential to enduring repeated labor and mitigating risk. Mutual reliance becomes instinctive. Evening approaches, and the final chimneys are climbed. You descend, exhausted, lungs tight, skin covered in soot. The hands ache, fingers blistered, body stiff from repetitive strain. Hunger remains. The evening meal is modest. Thin porridge or stale bread, sometimes supplemented with scraps from the streets or sympathetic neighbors. Sleep will be shallow, yet the body and mind require it to endure the next day. The routine repeats, predictable, and in that repetition lies survival. Reflection comes quietly. The hazards are constant: soot inhalation, cramped flues, falls, exposure to cold, and long-term physical deterioration. Even surviving childhood in this environment is remarkable. The repetition, observation, and disciplined application of learned techniques become tools of survival. Physical resilience develops alongside awareness, precision, and endurance. Every successful day is an invisible triumph. The psychological toll is subtle but cumulative. Fear, discomfort, and fatigue are constant companions. Awareness of danger, the inevitability of injury, and exposure to environmental hazards shape behavior. Adaptation occurs gradually. Children learn to regulate fear, pace labor, and respond instinctively to hazards. Survival depends on habituation, repetition, and the ability to internalize lessons of the body and environment. Hygiene is difficult to maintain. Soot permeates skin, hair, and clothing, and respiratory irritation is constant. Long-term consequences, lung damage, respiratory disease, and skin conditions are inevitable, though often unnoticed in childhood. Daily labor, exposure, and environmental hazard become normalized. Even when conditions are severe, routines provide structure, predictability, and a faint sense of control over survival. Social observation remains critical. Compliance with clients' expectations, attentiveness to older sweeps, and alignment with informal hierarchies determine both employment and survival. Any misstep may result in additional labor, reprimand, or injury. Children learn to navigate these subtle social structures with as much precision as the physical challenges of climbing chimneys. Survival is not solely physical, it is social, strategic, and attentive. The smallest victories, completing a climb without injury, securing payment, finishing tasks efficiently, accumulate into endurance. Habits, observations, and physical adaptations combine to sustain life in a world indifferent to age, strength, or fragility. Even monotony and repetition serve a purpose. They reinforce skill, build resilience, and preserve the ability to function under constant risk. By nightfall, the streets grow quiet, fog thickens, and coal smoke clings to every surface. You return to your lodging, muscles aching, lungs tight, hands blackened, and body stiff. The workday concludes, but preparation for tomorrow is never far from mind. Ropes must be checked, tools inspected, clothing prepared. The continuity of labor, vigilance, and endurance is essential for survival. Sleep arrives, though light and punctuated by aches and hunger. You lie on straw bedding, reflecting on the day, the climbs, scrapes, minor victories, and narrow escapes. Even small accomplishments matter. Completing a flue, navigating a tricky bend, or learning a subtle technique adds to the cumulative knowledge that allows life to continue. Experience becomes skill, skill becomes habit, and habit becomes survival. Close your eyes, feel the soot on your skin, the ache in your muscles, the lingering tension in your lungs. Life continues because of repetition, observation, and disciplined endurance. Each day builds skill, resilience, and the quiet ability to persist in a harsh, dangerous world. The chimneys will remain, the smoke will continue to curl into the foggy sky, and children like you will continue to climb, scrape, and endure. Tomorrow will demand the same, and your survival will depend on the same invisible tools: vigilance, habit, attention to detail, and endurance. Life persists quietly, monotonously, and relentlessly. And as you drift towards sleep, let the memory of today settle, the soot fade from thought, and the quiet rhythm of labor and survival carry you gently into rest. Night has fully settled over Victorian London, and fog clings to narrow streets, muting the sounds of the city. You lie on straw bedding in a cramped room, muscles aching, lungs tight from soot inhalation, and hands blackened and raw. The day's climbs are behind you, but the cumulative toll of labor, exposure, and hunger presses against both body and mind. Even rest is measured, careful, and partially alert to the hazards that define survival in this world. Reflection comes slowly. Survival as a child chimney sweep is not about heroism or adventure. It is about repetition, endurance, and careful observation. Every climb, every brushstroke along brick walls, every calculated breath of soot-laden air has strengthened your body and refined instinct. Each successful day is a quiet triumph, invisible, uncelebrated, but essential. Survival is an accumulation of small successes, learned habits, and careful adaptation to an unforgiving environment. Long-term physical consequences are inevitable. Repeated climbing and contorted postures have strained muscles and joints. Lungs constantly exposed to soot and fine particulates are weakened. Some children develop chronic respiratory issues, persistent coughs, and diminished capacity for exertion. Skin, exposed to abrasive bricks and soot, is roughened, scarred, and prone to infection. Injuries, broken bones, bruises, and burns are frequent, and treatment is minimal, often leaving permanent damage. Survival in this context is endurance despite cumulative harm. The psychological impact is equally significant. Constant awareness of danger, the repetitive monotony of labor, and exposure to hierarchical pressures shape perception and behavior. Children learn to regulate fear, monitor subtle environmental cues, and internalize the rhythms of work. Habits develop as protective strategies, methodical movements, careful attention to footing, and precise use of tools. Adaptation is gradual, instinctual, and ultimately essential for survival. Social structures influence survival as much as physical labor. Older sweeps supervise younger ones, imparting practical knowledge and enforcing rules. Mistakes are corrected swiftly and often harshly. Cooperation, mentorship, and subtle observation allow children to navigate danger, social hierarchy, and client expectations. Survival depends not only on strength and skill but also on social acumen. Understanding hierarchy, reading signals, and anticipating expectations. Even small errors, missing a step, misjudging weight, failing to heed instruction, can have cascading consequences. Despite the severity of these pressures, quiet bonds develop. Children share advice, lend hands, or warn each other about hazards. Cooperation is practical rather than sentimental, yet it sustains life. Collective knowledge and small acts of assistance reduce risk and increase endurance. The ability to rely on others, to observe and adapt, becomes as essential as physical capability. Survival is both individual and collective, an interplay of learned skill and repetition is central to survival. Every day involves climbing chimneys, dislodging soot, regulating breath, and monitoring movements. Habits are honed through practice and necessity, embedding survival strategies into muscle memory and instinct. Efficiency reduces fatigue and risk, allowing children to function in dangerous environments with minimal conscious thought. Even the monotonous, repetitive labor, scraping, brushing, adjusting, ascending, descending, carries cumulative value. The act of enduring becomes skillful. Over time, the cumulative effects of soot inhalation, repeated injury, and malnutrition shape adult health and capacity. Many chimney sweeps develop chronic respiratory conditions, musculoskeletal disorders, and diminished life expectancy. Yet these consequences are invisible in childhood, deferred but inevitable. Survival is always precarious, measured in continued breath, functional limbs, and the ability to repeat labor each day. Economic pressures ensure the cycle continues. Payment is minimal, and survival depends on daily work. Families often rely on the income of child laborers. Hunger, exhaustion, and risk are unavoidable. You notice that even small errors, miscalculating time, dropping a brush, being slow on a task, can reduce earnings or provoke discipline. Efficiency, skill, and vigilance directly impact the continuation of life and labor. The repetition of daily labor is a strategy for both survival and subsistence, quietly imposed by necessity and social expectation. Children internalize these lessons early. Observation, imitation, and repetition teach practical skills and risk management. Habits, learned instinctively, regulate movement, breathing, and attention. Social coordination ensures tasks are completed efficiently, hazards are avoided where possible, and hierarchy is respected. Survival is a product of subtle, invisible systems rather than dramatic action. Each child becomes a repository of knowledge that enables endurance, adaptation, and survival. Evening descends, bringing brief respite. Fires are stoked, meals are prepared from thin rations, and limbs relax slightly. Yet awareness persists. Ropes must be checked, tools inspected, clothing prepared. The continuity of labor, vigilance, and endurance is essential. Sleep, though light and punctuated by aches, allows temporary recovery, maintaining the capacity for repetition the next day. Even rest is an act of preparation for survival. The hazards faced, soot, cramped flues, falls, long-term disease, hunger, exhaustion, are constant. Yet adaptation allows children to endure. Each climb, scrape, and measured breath becomes a strategy for persistence. Habits develop, knowledge accumulates, and instinct guides movement. Survival is methodical, repetitive, and painstakingly learned. It is endurance expressed in small, quiet, habitual actions. Looking back, you realize that childhood labor shapes not only physical capability, but worldview. Life is structured by repetition, observation, and attention to detail. Hazards are navigated by instinct and habit. Social bonds, subtle as they are, sustain collective endurance. Every minor success, every learned technique, every day survived contributes to a cumulative capacity to endure hardship. The legacy of labor is visible in posture, skill, and endurance, in the quiet knowledge of survival under relentless conditions. Even as an adult, the lessons of early labor endure: awareness, adaptability, patience, and repetition. Strength is secondary to precision. Endurance is nurtured through habitual action. Survival is cumulative, quiet, and uncelebrated. The experiences of childhood chimney sweeps leave invisible marks on the body, the mind, and social understanding, shaping the rest of life in subtle, persistent ways. Close your eyes. Feel the soot on your skin, the ache in your muscles, the rhythm of lungs adjusting to centuries of exposure. The chimneys endure, the fog persists, and the labor continues. You endure, and as sleep carries you, let the quiet repetition of survival, the careful observation, and the habits honed through necessity settle into your mind. Life continues, quietly, monotonously, persistently, and in its endurance lies an almost imperceptible triumph. Tomorrow will demand the same rhythm: climbing, scraping,